The moment Clara Hayes pulled that child from the burning barn, she knew her carefully guarded heart had betrayed her. She'd come to this godforsaken Wyoming ranch with one rule: don't get attached, cook the meals, collect the pay, disappear before anyone noticed the cracks in her armor. But standing in the ashen rain, holding a sobbing 6-year-old against her chest while the widowed rancher stared at her like she'd just rewritten his entire world, Clara realized she'd broken her own rule. She'd stopped being the hired help the moment she'd started to care, and there was no going back. I invite you to stay with me until the very end of this story. If it moves you, please hit that like button and leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The Greyhound bus coughed Clara Hayes onto the side of Highway 287 at 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon, and the Wyoming sun hit her like a physical blow. She stood there, suitcase at her feet, watching the bus disappear into the heat shimmer, and wondered, not for the first time, if desperation had finally made her stupid. The advertisement had been sparse to the point of suspicious: cook needed, remote ranch, room and board, experience with children preferred. No mention of salary, no phone number, just a P.O. box in a town called Artemis that didn't appear on most maps. Clara had written anyway. Now, standing on a ribbon of asphalt that cut through an ocean of sagebrush and emptiness, she questioned that choice. The nearest building was a gas station 3 miles back. The nearest town, according to the bus driver, was 12 miles ahead. And the ranch, well, the directions said someone would meet her here. She checked her watch. 3:17. The sun pressed down on her shoulders, heavy as hands. Sweat gathered at the small of her back beneath the collar of her blouse. She'd dressed carefully that morning in Denver, like someone arriving for a job interview, not like someone fleeing the wreckage of her previous life. Navy skirt, cream blouse, low heels that were already baking her feet. Her dark hair, shot through with premature silver at 42, was twisted into a bun that felt too tight. Everything felt too tight. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermals she couldn't see. Clara watched it and felt something in her chest constrict. This place was beautiful in a way that hurt. All that sky, all that space. After 18 months in a Denver apartment the size of a shoebox, the sheer scale of the landscape made her feel small and exposed. She was good at feeling small. It was the exposed part that frightened her. At 3:23, a truck appeared on the horizon. Clara's hand tightened on her suitcase handle as the vehicle took shape. An old Ford pickup, once blue, now sun-faded to the color of forget-me-nots left too long in a vase. It slowed as it approached, and Clara straightened her spine, putting on the expression she'd perfected over years. Pleasant, professional, utterly unremarkable. The truck stopped. The driver's door opened. The man who stepped out was not what Clara had expected. She'd pictured someone older, softer, a grandfather type looking for help with his late wife's duties. Instead, Luke Mercer looked like he'd been carved from the same stone as the distant mountains. Probably mid-40s, tall and lean with the kind of weathered face that came from years of squinting into sun and wind. Dark hair, gray at the temples. Work shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and mapped with scars. But it was his eyes that Clara noticed most. Hazel, sun-creased at the corners, and absolutely empty. Not cold, empty, like rooms in an abandoned house. "Miss Hayes," his voice matched his appearance, rough, spare, no warmth and no cruelty. Simple statement of fact. "Mr. Mercer." Clara extended her hand. He looked at it for a moment as if surprised by the gesture, then shook it briefly. His palm was calloused, his grip careful. "This all you got?" He nodded at her single suitcase. "I travel light." Something that might have been approval flickered across his face, too quick to name. He took her suitcase, ignored her protest, and loaded it into the truck bed with the ease that suggested it weighed nothing. Clara noticed other things in the bed: fence posts, a toolbox, a bag of feed, a child's forgotten baseball glove. The passenger door groaned when he opened it for her. The seat was sun-cracked vinyl, patched in places with duct tape. A booster seat was strapped in the back, pink with cartoon ponies. The dashboard held a layer of dust and a parking ticket from Artemis dated 3 months prior. Clara climbed in, her skirt hiking up in a way that made her grateful he'd already moved to the driver's side. Luke started the engine, it caught on the third try, and pulled back onto the highway without a word. They drove in silence. Clara kept her hands folded in her lap, her gaze on the landscape rolling past. The silence didn't feel awkward exactly, but it had weight. She tried to read the man beside her in her peripheral vision. His jaw was set, his hands loose on the wheel. He drove like someone who'd traveled this road so many times he could do it blind. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, Clara broke. The letter said 6 children. "Yes, ma'am." Silence resumed. Clara waited. When nothing else came, she tried again. "How old?" "Ethan's 16, then Natalie at 14, the twins Caleb and Caroline are 11, Sophie's 8, and Daisy just turned 6. He delivered this information like he was reading a grocery list. No inflection, no elaboration. Clara did the math quickly. 16 years since the oldest was born. She'd been told his wife had died 2 years ago. 14 years of marriage, maybe 15, and now he was alone with 6 children on a remote ranch hiring strangers. "How long since your last cook?" Clara kept her voice neutral. 3 months. Woman before lasted 6 weeks. One before that made it 10 days. Why'd they leave? Luke's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Isolation got to one. Work was too hard for the other. "And which do you think I'll be?" He glanced at her then, really looked at her for the first time. Those hazel eyes assessed her with the same careful attention he'd probably give a horse he was considering buying. Clara held his gaze, refusing to look away. "Haven't decided yet," he said finally, and returned his attention to the road. 20 minutes from the highway, they turned onto a dirt road that cut through ranch land like a scar. The truck rattled over cattle guards, past fence lines that stretched toward infinity. Clara saw cattle in the distance, dark shapes against gold grass. A windmill spun lazily against the enormous sky. Then, finally, the ranch house appeared. Clara's first thought was that it looked tired. 2 stories, white clapboard siding that had gone gray in places where the paint had peeled. A wraparound porch with a swing that hung crooked on its chains. Window screens with holes, curtains visible behind them. Some drawn, some not, giving the house a lopsided, squinting appearance. Outbuildings clustered nearby. A barn that had seen better decades. A chicken coop, something that might have been a bunkhouse. A machine shed with its door hanging open. Everything looked functional but neglected, like a person who'd stopped caring about appearances and was just trying to survive. Luke parked in front of the house and killed the engine. In the sudden silence, Clara heard wind chimes, a lonely sound that made her throat tight. "Kids are around somewhere," Luke said, climbing out. "I'll introduce you." Clara followed him up the porch steps, noting the boards that needed replacing, the railing with its chipped paint. Through the screen door, she could see into a dim hallway. The chimes were on the porch, she realized. Ceramic angels, sun-bleached and turning in the breeze. Luke opened the door and called out, "Kids, come meet Miss Hayes." Nothing. He tried again, louder. "Ethan, Nat, get down here." Footsteps thundered from somewhere above. Clara stepped into a living room that might have been welcoming once. Now it looked like a place where people existed rather than lived. A couch with cushions askew, yesterday's newspaper on the floor, boots kicked off and abandoned. School backpacks piled by the stairs. A coffee table bearing water rings and what looked like math homework. But no photographs. Clara's gaze swept the walls and mantel. Not a single family photo. Just blank spaces and nail holes where frames had hung. A girl appeared on the stairs first. 14. Natalie, Clara remembered. Tall and coalfish, all angles and wariness. Dark hair like her father's, but her mother's features, delicate where his were harsh. She wore cut-off shorts and an oversized t-shirt, and she looked at Clara with an expression that was half curiosity, half resentment. "This is Natalie," Luke said. "Nat, this is Clara Hayes. She's the new cook." "Hi." Natalie's voice was flat. "Hello, Natalie. It's nice to meet you." The girl shrugged and looked away. More footsteps, and the twins appeared, a boy and girl, identical except for their hair length. Both had their father's hazel eyes and a spattering of freckles across their noses. They stopped halfway down the stairs and stared. "Caleb and Caroline," Luke said. "Hey," the boy, Caleb, offered. Caroline said nothing, just studied Clara with an intensity that was unnerving in an 11-year-old. "Where's Sophie and Daisy?" Luke asked Natalie. Outside. They were playing by the creek last I saw. Luke's expression tightened. Creek's running fast with the snow melt. They know better. He headed for the back of the house, calling over his shoulder, "Show her to her room, Nat. Second door on the left upstairs." Then he was gone, the screen door slamming behind him. Clara stood in the living room with 3 children staring at her and no idea what to say. The silence stretched out, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, Natalie sighed. "Your room's this way." She led Clara upstairs without looking back to see if she was following. The stairs creaked. The banister was loose. At the top, a hallway ran the length of the house, doors on either side, all closed except one that revealed a bathroom with toys scattered around the tub. Natalie stopped at the second door on the left and pushed it open. This was... She stopped, swallowed. "This is the guest room." This was something else, Clara heard in the interruption. This was Mom's sewing room. This was the office. This was where we used to be happy. The room was small but clean, a double bed with a faded quilt, a dresser with a mirror, a window that looked out over the barnyard, Spartan and sad and somehow perfect. "Bathroom's down the hall," Natalie said. "You share with us. Dad has his own off the master bedroom." "Thank you." Natalie nodded and turned to leave. "Natalie?" The girl stopped but didn't turn around. "I know this is strange," Clara said quietly. "Having a stranger in your house. I'll try not to be in the way." For a moment, Natalie was silent. Then, so quietly, Clara almost missed it. "They all say that." She was gone before Clara could respond. Clara set her suitcase on the bed and sat beside it, suddenly exhausted. Through the window, she could see Luke in the distance, walking toward a line of cottonwoods that must mark the creek. 2 small figures ran to meet him, the younger girls, she assumed. The house settled around her with small sounds, footsteps in other rooms, a door closing, the wind chimes on the porch. Clara closed her eyes and wondered, not for the first time, what she'd gotten herself into. She'd left Denver to escape judgment, gossip, the suffocating weight of her ex-husband's betrayal, and her own humiliation. She'd wanted isolation, wanted a place where nobody knew her story or cared about her past. Looking around this sad, hollow house, Clara realized she might have gotten exactly what she wished for. She stood and began unpacking. Dinner that first night was a revelation in discomfort. Clara had gone downstairs at 5:30, unsure of the schedule but determined to start as she meant to go on. The kitchen was large and outdated. Laminate counters from the 70s, appliances that predated the internet, a table big enough for 8 that looked like it hadn't seated more than 3 in months. The refrigerator held basics, milk, eggs, butter, some questionable leftovers. The pantry was better stocked, canned goods, pasta, rice, flour. Someone had been shopping with efficiency rather than imagination. Clara found chicken in the freezer and began the process of defrosting it while she explored the kitchen's geography. She worked quietly, learning where things lived. Pots in the lower cabinet, plates in the upper, mismatched glasses in the cupboard by the sink. She was seasoning the chicken when Ethan appeared. The oldest boy looked exactly like his father. Same height, same build, same hard set to his jaw. But where Luke's eyes were empty, Ethan's were full of anger. "You don't need to do that," he said from the doorway. Clara looked up. "Do what?" "Cook. We can handle our own meals." "I'm sure you can. But it's what I'm here for." "We didn't ask for you to be here." Clara set down the pepper grinder and turned to face him fully. The hostility in his voice was clear, but underneath it she heard something else. Fear, maybe. Or grief. "You're right," she said evenly. "You didn't ask. But your father hired me, and I'm here to do a job. I'm not trying to replace anyone or change anything. I'm just here to help." "We don't need help." "Then you can consider me the person who cooks dinner while you focus on more important things." Ethan's jaw worked. He wanted to argue more. She could see it, but he couldn't quite find the angle. Finally, he just turned and left, his boots heavy on the floor. Clara returned to the chicken, her hands steady even though her heart was racing. She'd expected resistance. Any grief counselor could have predicted it, but knowing it was coming and experiencing it were different things. By 6, she had dinner ready: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans from a can, and biscuits from scratch because the kitchen had been crying out for something homemade. She set the table for 8, found napkins in a drawer, and called the family to dinner. They came reluctantly. Luke sat at the head of the table, Ethan to his right. Natalie herded the younger children into their seats, the twins side by side, Sophie and Daisy at the far end. Clara took the remaining chair between Daisy and the empty seat that made 8. No one had told her there was an empty seat. No one had to. The silence was crushing. Luke served himself without comment, passed the platter to Ethan. The food made its way around the table in complete quiet. Even the youngest children didn't speak, didn't squirm, didn't act like children at all. They ate like people performing a duty. Clara watched them, her own appetite gone. Sophie, 8 years old with honey blonde hair, pushed food around her plate without eating. Daisy, the youngest, kept glancing at the empty chair and then away. The twins ate mechanically. Natalie stared at her plate like she was reading something written there. And Luke ate like he was alone. Clara had lived through plenty of uncomfortable meals. Her marriage had been full of them, silent dinners where she and David had chewed through their resentments along with their food. But this was different. This wasn't a marriage falling apart. This was a family already shattered, going through motions that used to mean something. "The chicken's good," Caleb offered finally, his voice too loud in the silence. "Thank you." "Mom used to make chicken on Sundays," Daisy said, her voice small. The silence that followed was like a physical presence. Natalie's fork clattered against her plate. Ethan's jaw tightened. Luke kept eating as if he hadn't heard, but Clara saw his knuckles whiten around his knife. "I'm sure it was wonderful," Clara said gently. Daisy looked at her with eyes too old for 6 years. "It was better than yours." "Daisy," Luke said quietly. "But it was, Daddy. Hers was better." "Finish your dinner." The little girl's eyes filled with tears. She pushed back from the table and ran. They heard her footsteps on the stairs, the slam of a door. No one went after her. Clara set down her fork, her stomach in knots. "I should—" "Leave her," Luke said. "She'll settle." "She's upset. She's been upset for 2 years." Luke's voice was flat, factual. 5 minutes won't make a difference." Clara stared at him. The other children kept eating, or pretending to eat, and no one seemed to think anything was wrong with letting a 6-year-old cry alone in her room. She stood. "Miss Hayes." Luke's voice held a note of warning. "I need to use the restroom," Clara lied and left before he could argue. She found Daisy's room by following the sound of crying, a pink door with a rainbow sticker and a sign that said Daisy's room in crayon. Clara knocked softly. "Go away." "Daisy, it's Miss Hayes. Can I come in?" "No!" Clara tried the door, unlocked. She opened it carefully and found Daisy face down on a bed covered with stuffed animals, sobbing into a pillow. "I said go away!" "I heard you." Clara sat on the edge of the bed. "But I wanted to tell you something." Daisy turned her head enough to glare at Clara with red, puffy eyes. "What?" "You're absolutely right. Your mother's chicken was probably much better than mine." Daisy blinked, confused. "I never met your mother, but I bet she was a wonderful cook, and I bet Sunday dinners were special, and I bet her chicken was the best thing you'd ever tasted." Clara smoothed the quilt absently. "I'm not here to make her chicken, Daisy." "I couldn't if I tried. I'm just here to make dinner." "I want my mom." The words broke on a sob. "I know, sweetheart, I know." "Why did she have to die?" Clara's throat closed. "I don't know. Everyone says she's in a better place, but this was her place. We were her place." Daisy's voice rose. "Why would heaven be better than us?" Clara had no answer for that. She'd asked similar questions when her own mother died. The platitudes people offered had felt like insults. "Can I tell you something?" Clara asked. Daisy nodded, still crying. "It's okay to be angry. It's okay to miss her. It's okay that my chicken isn't as good. You don't have to pretend anything is fine when it's not." "Daddy says we have to be strong." "Being strong doesn't mean not crying. Sometimes being strong means crying exactly when you need to." Daisy sat up and threw herself at Clara, wrapping small arms around her waist. Clara held her, this child she'd known for 3 hours, and felt something crack open in her own chest. She'd come here to hide from connection, from emotion, from risk. But Daisy was crying into her shirt, and Clara was crying too, and there was no hiding from this. They stayed like that until Daisy's sobs quieted to hiccups. Then Clara helped her wash her face, smoothed her tangled blonde hair, and walked her back downstairs. The dinner table was empty. The food had been cleared. Through the kitchen window, Clara could see Luke outside, a shadow against the barn. "Come on," Clara said. "Let's find you something to eat." She reheated chicken and potatoes while Daisy sat at the table, subdued now. The little girl ate slowly, methodically, and Clara washed dishes and wondered what she'd signed up for. "Miss Hayes?" "Yes?" "Will you stay?" Clara turned from the sink. "What?" "Will you stay?" "The other ladies left. Will you leave too?" Clara looked at this small girl with her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness, and she couldn't lie. "I honestly don't know, Daisy, but I'm here right now." Daisy considered this. Then she nodded, as if that was answer enough, and went back to her chicken. Clara's first week at the ranch passed in a blur of routines and revelations. She woke each morning at 5:30 to the sound of Luke's truck starting in the yard. He was always gone before she made it downstairs, off to check cattle, mend fence, handle the 1,000 daily tasks that kept a ranch running. Sometimes Ethan went with him. Sometimes the boy appeared at breakfast, silent and hostile. She learned the rhythms of the house quickly. Natalie was in charge of getting the younger kids ready for school. The bus came at 7:15, a yellow beacon in all that emptiness. The twins were perpetually late, perpetually disorganized. Sophie was quiet, watchful, the kind of child who disappeared into corners. And Daisy followed Clara everywhere. "Can I help?" became the little girl's constant question. Clara said yes more often than not, even when it would have been faster to work alone. Daisy set the table with painstaking care, measuring the distance between each plate with her hands. She helped snap green beans, fold laundry, water the half-dead plants on the kitchen windowsill. "Mom used to let me help," Daisy explained on the third day, standing on a stool to reach the counter. "Then she got sick and couldn't do things anymore. And then she died, and nobody cooks now except stuff from boxes." Clara handed her a wooden spoon. "Well, we're not using boxes anymore." Daisy beamed. The other children were harder to reach. Sophie observed Clara from a distance, never rude, but never warm. The twins were polite but distant, like they were waiting for her to leave before investing any emotion. Natalie was the most complex, sometimes helpful, sometimes resentful, always guarded. And Ethan was pure resistance. He challenged Clara on everything: the way she made coffee, the time she served dinner, the fact that she'd reorganized the pantry. Each challenge delivered with cold politeness that was somehow worse than anger. "Mom kept the pasta on the left," he said on day 4, watching Clara put groceries away. "I didn't know that. Would you like me to move it back?" "What does it matter? Everything's different now anyway." He left before she could respond. Clara mentioned none of this to Luke. The man was a ghost in his own house, present only at dinner and even then barely there. He ate whatever she put in front of him without comment, answered questions with monosyllables, and disappeared back outside the moment the meal ended. On day 5, Clara found him in the barn after dinner. She'd brought him coffee without quite knowing why, some instinct suggesting he might need it. The barn was dim and dusty, smelling of hay and horse and leather. Luke was in a stall with a mare, checking her hooves. "Mr. Mercer?" He looked up, surprised. "Thought you'd gone to bed." "Not yet. I brought coffee." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Set it on the bench there." Clara did, but didn't leave. She watched him work. This man who'd hired her sight unseen, who barely spoke to her or his children, who carried grief like a physical weight. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Can I stop you?" Almost a joke. Clara took it as permission. "Why did you hire me?" Luke straightened, wiped his hands on his jeans. Needed help. "You could have hired from town, someone local." "Tried that. Didn't work." "Why not?" He was quiet for so long Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "People here knew Anne, my wife. They come in with ideas about how things should be, how she would have done it. They try to help in ways that just make it worse. And you thought a stranger would be better? Thought a stranger might just do the job without trying to fix everything else." Clara absorbed this. "I can't fix anything, Mr. Mercer. I can just cook dinner and keep the house from falling apart. That's all I need. He picked up the coffee, drank it in 3 swallows, and handed her back the mug. Thanks for this. Dismissed, Clara returned to the house. On day 7, a Saturday, Clara learned what the town thought of her presence. She'd asked Luke if she could borrow the truck to drive into Artemis for groceries. He'd agreed with a shrug and handed her keys without asking what she needed. Artemis was barely a town, a main street with a post office, a diner, a feed store, a bar, and a grocery that clearly served a 50-mile radius. Clara parked the truck and went inside, grateful for air conditioning and something resembling civilization. She was comparing prices on chicken when she heard the whispers. 2 women, maybe in their 60s, standing one aisle over, their voices carried. Living out there now, Ruth says. How long? Week already. Can you imagine? Poor Anne must be rolling in her grave. Clara's hand tightened on the package of chicken. Luke Mercer should be ashamed. Those children need a mother, not some bought woman from the city. What will people think? Clara set down the chicken carefully and walked away. Her face burned, her hands shook. She finished her shopping in silence, paid, and left without making eye contact with anyone. The drive back was a blur. She'd known there would be talk, of course. She'd lived through enough small-town gossip during her marriage's collapse. But hearing it here, in this place where she'd hoped to be anonymous, felt like a betrayal. Bought woman. As if Luke had purchased her services for something other than cooking. Clara's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. She'd been so careful in Denver, so conscious of appearances after David left her for his 26-year-old secretary. She'd endured the pitying looks, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room, the casual cruelty of friends who took sides. She'd thought distance would help. Instead, she'd just found new people to judge her. The ranch appeared on the horizon, and Clara felt an unexpected surge of relief. At least here, the judgment was honest and direct. Ethan's hostility, Natalie's wariness, those she could handle. It was the behind-the-back cruelty that made her want to run. She parked and started unloading groceries. Luke appeared from the barn, wiping grease from his hands. He took one look at her face and stopped. What happened? Nothing. That's a lie. Clara hefted a bag of groceries. Just some women in town, talking. About? Does it matter? Luke's jaw set. What did they say? Mr. Mercer? What did they say, Miss Hayes? Clara set down the groceries and looked at him directly. They called me a bought woman. Suggested you hired me for purposes other than cooking. Expressed concern for your children's exposure to someone like me. Luke's expression went carefully blank. Names. I'm not telling you that. I'll find out anyway. Artemis has 4 gossipy women and I know all of them. And then what? You'll defend my honor? Clara laughed bitterly. That'll just make it worse. We both know how this works. You want to let them talk? I want to do my job without this becoming some kind of scandal. They stared at each other across the truck bed. Luke's eyes weren't empty now. They were burning with quiet fury. You didn't do anything wrong, he said finally. I know that. Then why do you look ready to bolt? Clara flinched. I'm not. You've got the same look the other 2 had before they left, like you're calculating how fast you can pack. I'm not leaving. Yet. Not yet, Clara agreed. But I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it. Luke picked up 2 bags of groceries. Don't. Don't what? Let them run you off. That's what they want. Proof that outsiders don't belong, that things should stay broken. He headed for the house, then stopped and turned back. And for what it's worth, anyone who knows me knows I wouldn't hire you for anything but cooking. Anne made sure everyone in town understood I was a one-woman man. 2 years dead, and I still am. He disappeared inside before Clara could respond. She stood in the yard, the Wyoming wind pulling at her hair, and felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope. Hope was too dangerous, but something like recognition. Luke Mercer was a man who kept his word. Clara picked up the rest of the groceries and followed him inside. The second week brought new challenges. Ethan's hostility escalated. He accidentally knocked Clara's coffee off the counter. Forgot to tell her that Sophie was allergic to strawberries until after Clara had made strawberry shortcake. left muddy boots in the kitchen after Clara had just mopped. Small cruelties, each one plausibly deniable. Clara endured it without comment. She cleaned up the coffee, made a different dessert, mopped again. She'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting directly, but Natalie noticed. "He's being an ass," the 14-year-old said one afternoon, finding Clara scrubbing mud from the kitchen floor. "I can talk to him. It's fine." "It's not fine. He's doing it on purpose." Clara sat back on her heels. "Why do you think he's doing it?" Natalie shifted uncomfortably. "He misses Mom." "You all miss your mother." "Yeah, but Ethan, he was her favorite. Don't tell the others I said that, but it was true. They had this bond. When she got sick, he was the one who helped take care of her, drove her to treatments, sat with her during chemo, held her hand when..." Natalie's voice broke. "When she died, something in him died too." Clara ached for this boy she barely knew. "And now I'm here, doing things his mother used to do, and doing them wrong." Natalie's voice was gentle. "Not because you actually are, but because you're not her. Nothing will ever be right for him because she's gone." "What do I do?" "I don't know. The other women tried being nice, tried being strict, tried ignoring him. Nothing worked." Clara returned to scrubbing. "Then I'll just keep doing my job. Eventually he'll run out of ways to punish me for existing." "Or you'll leave like the others." "I'm not leaving." Natalie studied her with those two old eyes. "Why not? The work's hard. We're all a mess. Dad barely talks. The town hates you, and my brother's treating you like dirt. Why stay?" Clara paused, considering the question seriously. Why was she staying? It wasn't the money. She'd barely discussed salary with Luke. It wasn't the job itself. She'd been a paralegal before, could probably find easier work. "Because," she said finally, "I don't have anywhere else to be. And broken as this is, it's honest. Nobody here is pretending to be something they're not." Natalie absorbed this. Then quietly, "Are you broken too?" Clara looked at this perceptive girl and decided on truth. "Yes." "What broke you?" "That's a longer story than we have time for right now." Natalie nodded, accepting the boundary. Then she picked up a second rag and started helping with the floor. They worked in companionable silence until Daisy bounded in, chattering about a nest of baby birds she'd found, and the moment passed. But something had shifted. Natalie had chosen a side, however tentatively. One ally was better than none. The weather turned on day 12. Clara woke to thunder and a sky the color of bruises. Rain hammered the roof, wind shook the windows, and the house felt like it was shuddering under the onslaught. Downstairs, she found Luke at the table in his work clothes, draining coffee. "Storm's supposed to last all day," he said. "Kids won't have school. Bus won't run in this. I've got to get the cattle to higher ground before the creek floods." "Will you be safe?" He gave her a look that suggested this was a ridiculous question. "Done it before." "Do you need help?" "You know anything about moving cattle?" "No." "Then no." He stood, grabbed his hat. "Keep the kids inside. If the power goes out, generators in the machine shed. Ethan knows how to run it." Then he was gone, out into the deluge. The day passed strangely. The younger children were restless, cooped up and energetic. Clara kept them occupied with baking, cookies, bread, brownies, anything to keep small hands busy. Sophie helped quietly, Caroline with enthusiasm, Daisy with constant questions. Caleb and Ethan disappeared to their rooms. Natalie curled up on the couch with a book, occasionally glancing out the window at the storm. Around 2, the power went out. The house plunged into gloom. Daisy squeaked in alarm. "It's okay," Clara said calmly. "Just the storm. We'll get the generator going." She found Ethan in his room, headphones on, reading by the gray window light. When she knocked, he pulled off the headphones with obvious reluctance. "Your father said you know how to run the generator." Ethan's expression was unreadable. "Yeah." "Will you show me, in case this happens again when you're not here?" For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then he stood. "Fine." The machine shed was 50 yards from the house, and they were both soaked through in the time it took to reach it. Ethan opened the shed door and led her to a generator that looked older than Clara. "It's pretty simple," he said, his voice flat. "Check the oil, check the gas, pull the cord. Once it catches, flip these switches to connect to the house. He demonstrated each step with mechanical precision. Clara watched carefully, aware this might be a test. Got it? I think so. Can I try? Ethan stepped back. Clara checked the oil and gas as he'd shown, then pulled the cord. Nothing. She tried again. On the third pull, the generator coughed to life. Not bad, Ethan said grudgingly. Clara flipped the switches. In the house across the yard, lights flickered on. They stood in the shed, rain drumming on the metal roof. This was the most time Clara had spent alone with Ethan, and the silence felt loaded. Your father's lucky to have you, she said finally. To have someone he can count on. He counted on my mom, then she died. So now he counts on you. Yeah, Ethan's voice was bitter. Now I get to be the man of the house at 16. Wake up before dawn, work until dark, take care of everyone. It's great. Clara heard the exhaustion beneath the anger. That's too much for anyone to carry. What choice do I have? Someone's got to keep things together. That shouldn't be your job. You're still a kid. Ethan's laugh was harsh. Haven't been a kid since Mom got diagnosed. Someone had to grow up. What about your father? Dad's doing the best he can, which isn't saying much. Ethan's jaw tightened. He loved her so much he can barely function without her. So yeah, it falls to me. And you resent that. Wouldn't you? Clara thought about her own father, dead from a heart attack when she was 12, and her mother's immediate collapse into grief that had lasted years. She thought about becoming the caretaker at an age when she should have been carefree. Yes, she said quietly. I would. I did. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since she'd arrived. Your mom. My dad died. My mom didn't handle it well. I was 12, old enough to cook, clean, make sure bills got paid, not old enough to understand why I had to. Did it get better? Clara considered lying, offering false comfort. Eventually, but it took years, and I lost a lot of my childhood in the process. Ethan was quiet. Then, I don't want the kids to lose theirs. That's why I get so... He stopped. Angry? Protective? Yeah. At me specifically, or at the situation? Both. Neither. Ethan rubbed his face. I don't know. You seem okay, I guess, but the others before you seemed okay too, and then they left and the kids got hurt again. Daisy cried for days after the last one quit. Understanding dawned. You're trying to protect them from getting attached to me. What's the point of letting them love someone who's going to leave? Clara's heart cracked. Ethan, I can't promise I'll never leave. Life doesn't work that way. But I can promise I'm not leaving because the work is hard or because you're making it difficult. If I leave, it'll be for reasons that have nothing to do with you. That's not much of a promise. It's the only honest one I can give. He studied her, this boy who'd become a man too soon, and something in his expression softened fractionally. You really cleaned my mom's cast iron skillet? Clara blinked at the change of subject. The big one? Yes, it was... I know, it was disgusting. I kept meaning to deal with it, but... He shrugged. It's a good pan. It should be used. Mom loved that thing. Grandma gave it to her when she and Dad got married. I'm sorry. If you'd rather I not use it... No. Ethan's voice was rough. Use it. That's what it's for. She'd be pissed if she knew it was just sitting there getting rusty. It was the closest thing to approval he'd offered. Clara accepted it carefully. Thank you. The rain was easing. Ethan moved toward the shed door, then stopped. Miss Hayes? Yes? The strawberry thing. Sophie's not actually allergic. I lied. Clara had suspected as much. Why? Because I wanted you to fail at something. He wouldn't meet her eyes. That was shitty of me. Yes, it was. I'm sorry. 2 words, barely audible, but sincere. Apology accepted, Clara said. And for what it's worth, I understand why you did it. They walked back to the house through the drizzle, not quite friends, but no longer enemies. It was a start. That evening, Luke returned home exhausted, soaked, and covered in mud. The cattle were safe, the crisis averted, but he looked like a man who'd fought a war. Clara had dinner waiting, Beef stew, because the day had called for something warm and substantial. She took one look at him and said, "Go shower. I'll keep this warm." He was too tired to argue. 20 minutes later, he reappeared in clean clothes, hair still damp. The children were already eating, chattering about the storm, the power outage, the excitement of an unexpected day off. Luke sat and started eating without a word. "Dad saved all the cows," Daisy announced proudly. "He's a hero." "Just doing my job, baby girl." "Still a hero," Daisy insisted. Luke's mouth almost smiled. Almost. Clara watched him eat, watched the tension slowly leave his shoulders as warmth and food did their work. She noticed the new cut on his hand, the deepening lines around his eyes. After dinner, she found him on the porch, staring out at the clearing sky. "Forgot to thank you," he said when she joined him, "for keeping things running today." "That's my job." Still, not everyone would have managed the generator, kept the kids calm, had food ready when I got back. He paused. Anne would have done all that, but none of the others did. It was the first time he'd voluntarily mentioned his wife to Clara. "She must have been remarkable," Clara said quietly. "She was." Luke's voice was rough. "Strongest person I ever knew. When she got sick, she fought for 2 years. 2 years of pain and treatment and knowing she was losing. Never complained, never asked why her shut, just kept loving us as hard as she could until the end." "I'm sorry you lost her." "Me too." He was quiet for a long moment. "The house died when she did. I tried to keep things going, but I didn't know how. She was the heart of everything." Clara understood. She'd felt that way about her own home after David left, like the center had been ripped out, leaving only walls. "Houses don't die, Mr. Mercer. They just go dormant, waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For someone to care enough to wake them up." Luke turned to look at her, and in the porch light, his eyes weren't empty anymore. "Is that what you're doing? Waking up my house?" "I'm just making dinner." "It's more than that." His voice was low, certain. "The kids are laughing again. There's food on the table. The place smells like baking instead of grief. That's not just dinner." Clara's throat tightened. "I don't want to overstep." "You're not." Luke held her gaze. "I hired you because I needed help. But what we needed was someone who wouldn't try to replace what we lost. Someone who'd just be here. That's what you're doing." "I'm trying." "I know, and I'm grateful." He straightened, pulling back into himself. "I should check on the kids." He left Clara alone on the porch, the wind chimes singing their lonely song, and she felt the weight of his words settle into her bones. She hadn't come here to save anyone. She'd come here to hide, but somehow, without meaning to, she was becoming part of something bigger than her own brokenness. And that terrified her almost as much as it comforted her. The third week began with Sophie's nightmare. Clara woke at 2 a.m. to screaming, high-pitched, terrified, the kind of sound that makes your heart stop. She was out of bed and running before she was fully awake, barefoot on the cold hallway floor. Sophie's door was already open, light spilling out. Natalie was there, sitting on the edge of the bed, trying to wake her sister. The 8-year-old thrashed against the blankets, still screaming, eyes open but unseeing. "Sophie, wake up! You're dreaming! Wake up!" Clara knelt beside the bed. "How long has she been like this?" "Just started. She has them sometimes, since Mom—" Natalie's voice cracked. "Let me try." Clara gently touched Sophie's shoulder. "Sophie, honey, you're safe. You're home. Can you hear me?" The girl's eyes focused suddenly, taking in the room, Natalie, Clara. Her screaming stopped, replaced by harsh breathing. "The fire," Sophie whispered. "There was fire everywhere, and Mom was inside and I couldn't get to her. It was just a dream. But what if it's real? What if there's a fire and we can't get out?" Natalie stroked her sister's hair. "There's no fire, Soph. You're okay." But Sophie was shaking, tears streaming down her face. Clara made a decision. "Come on, let's go downstairs. I'll make you some warm milk." "I'm not a baby," Sophie protested weakly. "No, but warm milk helps everyone sleep better. Scientific fact." It wasn't, but Sophie was too upset to argue. Clara led both girls downstairs, Natalie hovering protectively. In the kitchen, Clara heated milk with a touch of honey and vanilla while Sophie sat at the table, hugging herself. "Does this happen often?" Clara asked Natalie quietly. Couple times a month. Usually when something's changed or she's stressed about something. What changed? Natalie looked at Clara meaningfully. You did. Clara absorbed this. She was the disruption, the new element that had destabilized Sophie's fragile equilibrium. Should I talk to your father? He knows. He just doesn't know what to do about it. Clara poured the milk into mugs and brought them to the table. Sophie wrapped her hands around hers but didn't drink, just stared into it like she was reading tea leaves. My mom died in the hospital, Sophie said suddenly, but in my dreams, it's always fire. Isn't that weird? Dreams don't have to make sense, Clara said gently. I know how she really died. I was there. We all were, except Daisy. She was too little. Dad thought we should be there to say goodbye. Sophie's voice was eerily calm, like she was reciting something she'd memorized. She couldn't talk anymore by then, but she squeezed our hands, one by one. That was her saying goodbye. Clara's eyes stung. She didn't trust herself to speak. In the dreams, though, she's screaming for help and I can't reach her. The fire keeps getting bigger and I'm too small and weak and useless. Sophie's composure cracked. Why am I so useless? You're not useless, Natalie said fiercely. Don't say that. But I am. I couldn't help Mom. I can't help Dad. I can't even sleep without having stupid nightmares. Clara reached across the table and took Sophie's hand. Sweetheart, you were there when your mom needed you most. You held her hand. You said goodbye. That wasn't useless. That was brave. It didn't feel brave. It felt terrible. Brave things usually do. Sophie looked at Clara with red-rimmed eyes. Were you there when your dad died? Clara shook her head. No, he died at work, heart attack. I was at school. By the time I got to the hospital, he was already gone. Did you wish you'd been there? Every day for years. Does it still hurt? Sometimes, but differently now. More like an old scar than an open wound. Sophie considered this. How long until Mom feels like an old scar? Clara wished she had a better answer. I don't know. Everyone's different. They sat in silence for a while, drinking warm milk in a kitchen lit only by the stove light. Outside, the Wyoming night pressed against the windows, vast and dark and indifferent to human grief. Eventually, Sophie's eyelids started to droop. Natalie helped her sister upstairs, but Sophie stopped at Clara's door. Miss Hayes? Yes? If I have another nightmare, can I come get you? Clara's heart squeezed. Any time. Okay, good night. After they left, Clara stood in the hallway for a long moment, listening to the house settle around her. This wasn't what she'd signed up for. She was supposed to cook meals and stay invisible. Instead, she was comforting traumatized children at 2 a.m. and offering pieces of her own pain to help them make sense of theirs. She should have felt trapped, overwhelmed, eager to escape. Instead, she felt needed, and that was more dangerous than anything else. The next morning, Luke found Clara in the kitchen earlier than usual. She was kneading bread dough with more force than necessary, working out tension in the rhythmic push and fold. Heard there was some excitement last night, he said, pouring coffee. Sophie had a nightmare. We handled it. Natalie told me you sat up with her. It wasn't a big deal. Luke leaned against the counter, studying her. It was to Sophie. She hasn't let anyone comfort her since Anne died, usually just cries it out alone. Clara kept kneading. Well, she let me in last night. That means something? It means she's 8 years old and scared, and warm milk seemed like a reasonable solution. Clara shaped the dough into a ball and set it in a bowl to rise. She mentioned the fire in her dreams. Is there a history there? Something that happened? No. The nightmares started after Anne died. I think it's just her brain's way of processing, making the death into something dramatic instead of just wasting away in a hospital bed. Luke's voice was flat, factual, but Clara heard the pain beneath it. I've tried talking to her about it. Doesn't help. Maybe she needs to talk to someone who wasn't there, someone who doesn't carry their own grief about it. You offering? I'm saying sometimes it's easier to be honest with strangers. Luke drained his coffee. You're not a stranger anymore, Miss Hayes. He left before she could respond. The days developed a rhythm. Clara woke early, started breakfast, packed lunches for the school-aged children. Luke was always gone before dawn. Ethan had stopped actively sabotaging her, though he remained distant. Natalie had become an unexpected ally, helping wrangle the younger kids. The twins were warming up slowly, sometimes chattering at dinner about school and friends. And Daisy remained Claire's shadow, constantly underfoot and chattering nonstop. But it was Sophie who occupied Claire's thoughts. The girl watched everything with those careful eyes, participating in family life like an observer rather than a member. She did her homework without being asked, helped with chores without complaint, ate her meals in silence. Perfect behavior that was somehow more concerning than rebellion would have been. On Thursday afternoon, Clara found Sophie in the barn, sitting in the hayloft with a notebook. "Room for one more up there?" Sophie looked down, surprised. "I guess." Clara climbed the ladder, not easy in a skirt, and settled beside her. The loft was dusty and warm, afternoon sun slanting through gaps in the boards. From here you could see the whole ranch spread out like a map. "This is a good spot," Clara said. "It's quiet. Nobody bothers me here." "Should I leave?" Sophie shook her head. "You're different." "Well, how so?" "You don't try to make me talk about feelings." Clara smiled. "Noted. What are you working on?" "Just drawing." Sophie showed her the notebook, sketches of horses, the barn, the mountains in the distance. They were good, better than Clara expected from an 8-year-old, detailed and careful. "These are beautiful, Sophie." "Mom used to draw. She taught me before she got too sick." Sophie turned a page, revealing a sketch of a woman's face. Even in pencil, the resemblance to the children was clear. "This is her. I draw her sometimes so I don't forget what she looked like." Clara's throat closed. "That's a wonderful thing to do." "Do you ever worry you'll forget your dad?" "Sometimes. But then I remember something specific, the way he laughed or how his hands looked when he was fixing something, and it comes back." Sophie was quiet for a moment. "I'm forgetting her voice. I try to remember how she sounded when she said my name, but it's getting fuzzy, like static on a radio." "That's normal, honey. It doesn't mean you're forgetting her." "How do you know?" "Because memory doesn't work like a photograph. It works like a feeling. You might not remember exactly how her voice sounded, but you remember how it felt when she said your name. And that doesn't fade." Sophie considered this. "That's kind of nice, I guess." They sat in comfortable silence, watching dust motes dance in the sunlight. Finally, Sophie said, "Miss Hayes, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you going to marry my dad?" Clara choked on air. "What? No, why would you think that?" "Caroline said that's why you're really here. That Dad's looking for a new wife and you're like an audition." "Caroline is 11 and has an overactive imagination." "So you're not?" "Definitely not. Your father hired me to cook and help around the house, that's all." "But you like him, right?" Clara chose her words carefully. "I respect your father. He's a good man doing his best in a hard situation. But no, Sophie. I'm not here to replace your mother. Nobody could do that." Sophie seemed satisfied. "Okay, good. I just wanted to know. Can I ask you something now?" "I guess." "Why are you so worried about that?" Sophie hugged her knees. "Because if Dad gets married again, it means Mom's really gone, like officially replaced. And I'm not ready for that." "What if I told you that your dad loving someone new wouldn't mean he loved your mom any less?" "I'd say you're wrong. There's only so much love to go around." Clara thought about her own mother, who'd remarried 5 years after Clara's father died. The betrayal she'd felt, even as a teenager who should have understood. The anger that her mother could move on while Clara was still drowning in grief. "You know what I learned?" Clara said quietly. "Love isn't like pizza, where if someone gets a slice, there's less for everyone else. It's more like a candle. You can light 1,000 other candles from it, and the original flame doesn't get any smaller." That's a weird metaphor, but it's true. Your dad's love for your mom doesn't shrink if he finds happiness again. It just means he has more love to give. Sophie was quiet for a long time. Then, "I don't want him to be sad forever, but I don't want to forget her either. Those aren't the only 2 options. What's the third?" "Remembering her while still living, honoring her by being happy, not by staying miserable." Sophie laid her head on Clara's shoulder, a gesture so trusting it made Clara's eyes sting. I wish you could stay forever. Why? Because you're the first person who doesn't talk to me like I'm broken. Clara wrapped an arm around her. You're not broken, sweetheart. You're healing. There's a difference. They stayed in the hayloft until the dinner bell rang, actually just Daisy yelling that she was hungry, and climbed down together. But as they walked toward the house, Clara felt the weight of Sophie's trust settling on her shoulders. These children were starting to depend on her, and she had no idea if she was strong enough to hold them. That weekend, the town's judgment came to a head. Claire was at the feed store on Saturday, picking up chicken feed and supplies, when she overheard the conversation. Shameful, that's what it is. Those poor children, exposed to that woman. Luke should know better. Clara turned to find two women she recognized from her first grocery trip. They saw her and didn't even have the grace to look embarrassed. Can I help you ladies with something? Clara asked, voice calm. We're just expressing concern for the Mercer children, the older one said, chin raised. They've been through enough without their father bringing in some what? Clara stepped closer. Say it. Whatever you're thinking, say it to my face instead of behind my back. Oh, we don't know anything about you, the woman said. You could be anyone, and you're living in that house alone with a widower and his children. I'm cooking their meals and keeping their house from falling apart. What exactly do you think I'm doing wrong? It's about appearances, dear, propriety, what it looks like to have an unmarried woman living under Luke Mercer's roof. Clara laughed, short and bitter. I'm 42 years old. I'm divorced. I'm not some young girl out to trap your precious widower. I'm just trying to do a job. Then get a job somewhere else, the second woman said. Somewhere more appropriate. Why? Because you're uncomfortable? Because small-town gossip is more important than 6 children having someone who shows up every day and gives a damn? How dare you? No, how dare you? Clara's voice rose. You want to talk about those children? Fine. Ethan is 16 years old and running that ranch because his father is drowning in grief. Natalie is 14 and playing mother to her siblings. Sophie has nightmares because she watched her mom die. Daisy barely remembers having a mother at all. Those kids need help, and if my presence offends your sense of propriety, that's your problem, not mine. The store had gone silent. Everyone was watching. The older woman's face flushed. Luke Mercer's wife was a saint. I know. Everyone's told me. Anne was perfect. Anne was beloved. Anne is irreplaceable. Clara's voice shook. And I'm not trying to replace her. I'm just trying to make sure her children don't starve and her house doesn't fall down while everyone in this town is too busy judging to actually help. She paid for her purchases and left, hands trembling with adrenaline and anger. Outside, she stood by the truck, trying to calm her racing heart. She'd made things worse. The town already thought poorly of her. Now she'd confirmed every suspicion by losing her temper in public. That was something. Clara spun. Luke was leaning against the truck bed, arms crossed, expression unreadable. I didn't know you were in town, Clara said. Hardware store. Heard the commotion. He studied her. You planning on fighting the whole town? I wasn't fighting. I was defending. Same thing in Artemis. He pushed off the truck. Get in. We're leaving before this gets worse. They drove in silence for 10 minutes before Luke spoke again. You shouldn't have done that. Clara's jaw tightened. I know. They'll talk more now. Make it harder for you. I know. Could make it harder for the kids, too. Clara stopped. She hadn't thought about that. I'm sorry. I just couldn't stand there and let them... I know what you couldn't stand. I've been hearing it for 2 years. Luke's voice was rough. Every time I go to town, every church service, every school function, poor Luke, poor children, such a tragedy, as if saying it makes them helpful. They offered to help? In the beginning, brought casseroles, offered prayers, wanted to organize meals and childcare. But it all came with strings, expectations about how we should grieve, how fast we should move on. What we should need, Clara understood. So you stopped accepting help. Stopped accepting pity disguised as help. Luke's hands tightened on the wheel. The kids and I, we're figuring it out our own way. Might not be pretty, might not be what the town thinks we should do, but it's ours. And I'm part of that now? You're part of that now. He glanced at her. whether you plan to be or not. They pulled into the ranch, and Clara saw the children playing in the yard. Caroline and Caleb tossing a baseball, Daisy chasing chickens, Sophie reading on the porch steps. Normal. Almost happy. Miss Hayes? Luke's voice stopped her from getting out. Yes? What you said in there about the kids needing help. He paused, struggling with words. You were right, and I'm grateful you're willing to fight for them, even when it makes your life harder. Clara's throat tightened. They're good kids. They deserve someone in their corner. So do you. She looked at him, surprised. Next time someone gives you grief in town, you tell me. I'll handle it. I can fight my own battles, Mr. Mercer. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. His eyes met hers, and they weren't empty anymore. They were burning with quiet fury. Those women have no idea what you've done for my family, but I do. And I'm not going to stand by while they run you off with gossip and judgment. What will you do? Whatever I have to. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Clara got out of the truck, her heart doing strange things in her chest. Luke Mercer had just claimed her as part of his family, had offered to defend her against a whole town's worth of judgment, and the terrifying part was how much she wanted to let him. That night at dinner, Ethan broke his usual silence. Heard you told off Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Cooper today. Clara nearly dropped her fork. Where did you hear that? Caleb's friend's mom was in the store, stories all over town. All the children were watching her now. Even Luke looked interested. It wasn't that dramatic, Clara said. Brandon's mom said you made Mrs. Henderson cry, Caleb offered. I did not. Clara stopped. Well, maybe. But she started it. Natalie grinned. What did you say? Nothing worth repeating. Come on, the twins chorused. Tell us. Clara looked helplessly at Luke, who just raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying her discomfort. I may have pointed out that judging me was less important than making sure you all had someone who showed up every day. And? Natalie pressed. And I may have suggested that their concern was more about propriety than actually helping. Did you really call them hypocrites? Ethan asked. I didn't use that word specifically, but you implied it, Natalie said gleefully. That's amazing. It's not amazing. It's going to make everything harder. Good, Ethan said firmly. They've been talking crap about Dad for 2 years. About time someone called them out. Luke cleared his throat. Language. Sorry, talking garbage. Clara looked around the table at 6 children who were, for the first time, looking at her with something like admiration. Even Sophie was smiling. I don't want you kids thinking that losing your temper in public is a good idea, Clara said. But standing up for yourself is, Natalie countered. Right? Well, yes. Then you did the right thing. Daisy tugged on Clara's sleeve. Were you scared? Terrified. But you did it anyway? Sometimes being brave means being scared and doing it anyway. Daisy considered this seriously, then nodded. Okay, then I'm going to be brave too. About what, baby girl? Luke asked. I'm going to tell my class that Miss Hayes is nice, even if their moms say she's not. Clara's eyes stung. Daisy, you don't have to. Yes, I do, because you stood up for us. So I'm standing up for you. The other children murmured agreement. Even Ethan nodded. Luke caught Clara's eye across the table, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. A recognition that things had shifted, that Clara had crossed some invisible line from employee to family. After dinner, Clara found herself on the porch again. It was becoming her favorite spot, this in-between space where the house met the wild. You keep ending up out here. Clara turned to find Natalie joining her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. She offered one to Clara. It's peaceful, Clara said. It's where Mom used to sit. After dinner, when the dishes were done, she'd come out here and just breathe. Clara's hand tightened on the mug. I can go somewhere else. No, it's good that someone's using it. Natalie settled into the porch swing. The house has too many unused spaces, too many places that are like shrines to what we lost. Like the empty chair at dinner, Natalie nodded. Dad won't let anyone sit there. Says it's still Mom's seat. Maybe he needs it to be. Maybe, but it makes every meal feel like a funeral, Natalie sipped her tea. I miss her, but I'm tired of living in a museum of grief. Clara sat beside her, setting the swing in gentle motion. What would help? I don't know. Moving on feels like forgetting, but staying stuck feels like dying. Those aren't the only options. That's what you told Sophie, right? In the barn? You heard that? Some of it. I was looking for her. Natalie was quiet for a moment. Do you really believe it? That we can remember her and still live? I have to believe it. Otherwise, what's the point of surviving loss? Did you survive your dad dying? Clara thought about the girl she'd been before her father's death. Confident, happy, full of dreams. And the woman she'd become after, careful, controlled, always waiting for the next loss. I survived, she said slowly, but I let it change me in ways I didn't have to. I became so afraid of being hurt again that I stopped letting people in, and that's its own kind of death. Is that why you're divorced? Clara laughed, surprised by the directness. That's part of it. I married someone who seemed safe. Turned out he was just distant. When things got hard, he left. Do you miss him? No, I miss who I thought he was. But the real him? No. Do you think Dad will marry again? It was the second time that question had come up today. I don't know, Natalie. That's up to him. Would it bother you if he did? Clara turned to look at her. Why would it bother me? Natalie gave her a look that was far too knowing for 14. Come on, Miss Hayes. I see how you look at each other. We don't look at each other any particular way. You kind of do, like you're both surprised the other person exists. Clara had no response to that. Natalie smiled. It's okay. I think Mom would approve. Natalie, I'm serious. Mom always said Dad needed someone strong, someone who wouldn't put up with his stubbornness, someone who'd fight for us. She met Clara's eyes. That's you. I'm just the cook. You stopped being just the cook when you ran into Sophie's room at 2 a.m, or when you stood up to those women in town, or when you cleaned Mom's skillet and used it instead of leaving it as some sacred relic. Clara's throat was tight. I'm not trying to replace her. I know, but you're filling in the empty spaces she left, and that's not the same thing as replacing her. It's just being here, being present, being you. They sat in silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The wind chimes sang their lonely song. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. Miss Hayes? Yes? Thank you for staying, even when it's hard. Clara squeezed Natalie's hand. Thank you for letting me. The 4th week brought new challenges and small victories. The town's gossip intensified after Clara's confrontation, but she stopped caring. The children had claimed her as theirs, and that mattered more than what strangers thought. Ethan started talking to her at breakfast, actual conversations instead of hostile silence. He told her about the ranch work, college applications he was putting off, his worry about leaving his siblings. Clara listened without judgment, offered advice when asked, kept his confidences. The twins started setting the table without being asked, chattering about their day while they worked. Caroline showed Clara a story she'd written for English class. Caleb taught her how to throw a proper baseball. Sophie brought her drawings to the kitchen, working on homework while Clara cooked. Sometimes she talked. Sometimes she just sat in comfortable silence. Either way, the nightmares became less frequent. And Daisy bloomed. She laughed more, played harder, stopped clinging quite so desperately to Clara's skirts. Still followed her everywhere, still chattered nonstop, but with the confidence of a child who knew she was loved. The house itself seemed to wake up. Clara opened curtains that had been closed for months, letting light flood rooms that had been dark. She put fresh flowers on the table, wildflowers Daisy picked. She played music while she cooked, filled the house with the smell of baking bread, made small repairs that had been neglected. Luke noticed. Place looks different, he said one evening, standing in the kitchen doorway. Different good or different bad? Different alive. He started spending more time in the house. Not much, he was still drowning in ranch work, but he'd linger over breakfast, help with dishes after dinner, join the family in the living room instead of disappearing immediately. And Clara found herself watching for him, listening for his truck, feeling her heartbeat quicken when he walked into a room. It was dangerous and stupid and entirely unwelcome. She was here to work, to hide, to heal her own wounds without inflicting them on anyone else. falling for her employer, for a widower still grieving his wife, for a man with 6 children and a ranch and complications Clara couldn't begin to untangle, was not part of the plan. But hearts, Clara was learning, don't care much about plans. On a Thursday evening, while the children were doing homework and Clara was preparing dinner, Luke found her alone in the kitchen. "Can we talk?" Clara's stomach dropped. Those 3 words never preceded good news. "Of course. Not here. Walk with me?" They left the house, headed toward the barn in the golden light of early evening. Luke's hands were shoved in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "If this is about the town gossip," Clara started. "It's not." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it before you make any decisions about staying." Clara's heart hammered. "Okay." "When Anne died, I died too. Not literally, but—" He gestured helplessly. "Everything that made me who I was went into the ground with her. I became this hollow thing just going through motions. The ranch ran because it had to. The kids survived because they had no choice. But I wasn't living. I was just existing." Clara waited, afraid to interrupt. "Then you showed up, and I told myself it was just practical, hiring help because I needed it. But that's not what happened." Luke's eyes met hers. "You brought light back into this house. Real light, not just open curtains. The kids are laughing. They're healing, and I—" He stopped, jaw working. "You what?" Clara whispered. "I'm starting to feel things again, and it scares the hell out of me." Clara's breath caught. "Luke? I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable. I'm saying it because you deserve to know what's happening here. The kids are attached to you. I'm attached to you. And if you're going to leave, I'd rather it happen now before we're all completely dependent on you." "I'm not leaving." "You say that now, but what about in a month? 6 months? What happens when you realize how broken we all are? How much work this family needs? How complicated everything is?" Clara stepped closer. "What happens when you realize I'm just as broken as you are?" Luke stared at her. "What? You think you're the only one who's been destroyed by loss? I came here because I had nowhere else to go, because my marriage fell apart, and my ex-husband made sure everyone in Denver knew it was my fault. Because I was so lonely, I couldn't breathe, and I thought isolation would help." "Did it?" "No, but your children did. This messy, complicated, heartbreaking family did." Clara's voice shook. "You're all teaching me how to live again, too." They stood in the fading light, inches apart, the weight of confession hanging between them. "I don't know how to do this," Luke said quietly. "Anne was the only woman I ever loved. I don't know how to care about someone else. I don't know how to trust anyone again after David. I don't know how to be part of a family this big, this complicated." "So we're both disasters." "Pretty much." Luke almost smiled. Almost. "What do we do?" "I don't know, but maybe we don't have to figure it out all at once." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his calloused fingers gentle against her cheek. "The kids need stability," he said. "Whatever this is between us, we can't let it hurt them." "Agreed. And the town's going to have a field day if—" He stopped. "If anything changes. Let them talk." "Clara, let them talk," she repeated firmly. "I'm tired of living for other people's approval. I spent my whole marriage doing that, and it got me nowhere." Luke's thumb traced her cheekbone. "You're stronger than you think. So are you." They stood like that, not quite kissing, not quite pulling away, until Daisy's voice rang across the yard. "Miss Hayes, dinner's burning!" Clara jumped back. "Oh no!" She ran toward the house, Luke following. Smoke was indeed pouring from the kitchen window. Inside, the pot on the stove was blackened, the sauce inside turned to char. Clara grabbed the pot and dumped it in the sink, windows thrown open, waving smoke toward them. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I got distracted and completely forgot." "Is there more?" Luke asked calmly. "More what?" "Sauce. Can you make more?" Clara checked the pantry. "Yes, but it'll take another hour." "Then we'll wait." He turned to the children, who'd gathered in the doorway. "Who wants to help make dinner?" What followed was chaos.
Caleb and Caroline chopped vegetables with more enthusiasm than skill. Sophie measured ingredients while Natalie found the recipe. Ethan grudgingly helped Clara start the new sauce. And Daisy stood on a chair and stirred, narrating every action like a cooking show host. They made a mess. Spilled flour, splattered sauce, laughed when Caleb dropped an entire onion in the pot and had to fish it out. It took twice as long as it should have, and the result was imperfect.
But sitting around the table an hour later, eating slightly lumpy spaghetti sauce and laughing about the great burning disaster of whenever this was, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt home. And looking around at these 6 children and their father, all of them covered in flour and smiling, Clara made a decision. She was staying, not because she had nowhere else to go, not because they needed her, but because she needed them. And for the first time since her father died 30 years ago, that felt like enough. The heat came first. It arrived on a Monday morning in late July, rolling across the prairie like something alive and hungry. Clara woke to temperatures already climbing past 90, the air thick and still in a way that made her skin prickle with unease. By noon, the thermometer on the porch read 106 degrees, and the wind had picked up, hot and dry, sucking moisture from everything it touched. Luke came in from the morning chores looking grim. "Fire weather," he said, downing a glass of water in 3 swallows. "We need to clear the brush around the buildings, today." "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that I'm keeping the kids home and canceling all non-essential work." He refilled his glass. "You ever dealt with wildfires?" Clara shook her head. "Then listen carefully. If I say run, you run. You get the kids and you drive as far from here as you can. Don't stop to pack. Don't try to save anything. Just go." "Luke, you're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared. Fire out here doesn't give warnings. It just comes." He set down the glass, his expression softening slightly. "Probably nothing will happen, but I need to know you'll get them out if it does." "What about you?" "I'll do what I have to do." Before Clara could argue, he was gone again, calling for Ethan to help move equipment away from the barn. The day stretched out, hot and tense. Clara kept the children inside, curtains drawn against the brutal sun. They played board games and read books and pretended everything was normal, but Clara could feel the anxiety humming beneath the surface. Even Daisy was quiet, picking up on the adults' tension. By 3 o'clock, the sky had taken on a strange copper quality. The wind was constant now, rattling windows and sending tumbleweeds cartwheeling across the yard. Natalie stood at the window, watching her father and brother work. "I hate this weather." "Has there been a fire before?" Clara asked. "Not here, but the Peterson Ranch, 3 years ago. It burned everything. They lost their house, their barn, all their cattle." Natalie's voice was tight. "Mrs. Peterson got out with just the clothes on her back." Clara wanted to offer reassurance, but couldn't find words that weren't lies. At 4:30, Luke's phone rang. Clara watched through the window as he answered, his body going rigid. Even from a distance, she could see his expression change, jaw tight, eyes scanning the horizon. He hung up and started running toward the house. "Everyone in the truck, now!" Clara's heart stopped. "What's happening?" Lightning strikes started a fire 10 miles west, winds pushing it this direction. Luke was already moving through the house, grabbing truck keys, his wallet. "We've got maybe an hour before it gets here. Maybe less." The children scrambled into motion, controlled panic as they grabbed shoes and jackets. Clara's mind raced. What should she take? What mattered? "Miss Hayes." Luke's hand on her shoulder brought her back. "Just the kids. Nothing else matters." But as they headed for the door, Daisy suddenly broke away, running back toward the stairs. "Daisy, no!" Natalie lunged for her, but the 6-year-old was too fast. Luke swore and started after her, but Clara was closer. She caught Daisy at the bottom of the stairs, the little girl clutching something to her chest. "I need Bunny," Daisy sobbed. "Mom gave me Bunny. I can't leave without her." It was a stuffed rabbit, worn and faded, one ear hanging by threads. Clara's heart cracked. "Okay, baby, you've got her. Let's go." They piled into Luke's truck. All 8 of them squeezed into a cab meant for 6. The twins shared a seatbelt. Sophie sat on Natalie's lap. Daisy clutched her rabbit in Clara's arms. Luke drove, Ethan in the passenger seat scanning the horizon. "Where are we going?" Caroline asked, her voice small. Town, Luke said. Emergency shelter at the high school. What about the animals? Caleb's voice shook. Already turned the horses loose. Cattle are on their own. They'll head for the creek. Luke's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Everyone we can save is in this truck. They'd gone maybe 3 miles when Ethan pointed. Dad, look. To the west, the sky had turned black. Not storm cloud black, smoke black. And beneath it, a line of orange that seemed to stretch from earth to sky. How far? Luke's voice was steady, but Clara heard the fear beneath it. Maybe 5 miles, moving fast. Luke pressed the accelerator. The truck surged forward on the dirt road, rattling over washboard and potholes. Clara held Daisy tighter, whispered reassurances she didn't believe. They were going to make it. They had to make it. Then Sophie screamed, Bunny! Daisy dropped Bunny! Clara looked down. Her arms were empty except for Daisy. The stuffed rabbit was gone. It must have fallen out the window, Natalie said. Daisy, when did you open? But Daisy was already hysterical. We have to go back. We have to get Bunny. Baby girl, we can't, Luke started. Mom gave me Bunny. I can't lose Bunny. Daisy was sobbing, thrashing in Clara's arms. Please, Daddy, please. Daisy, I'm sorry, but I'll go back. Everyone turned to stare at Clara. What? Luke's voice was sharp. Pull over. I'll run back and find it. You keep going to town. Absolutely not. Luke, look at her. Clara nodded at Daisy, who was crying so hard she could barely breathe. She's 6 years old and she just lost the last thing her mother gave her. We can't let that happen. You'll die. Not if I'm fast. We only came 3 miles. I can run back, find the rabbit, and still have time to get to safety. You don't know that. And you don't know I won't make it. Clara was already unbuckling. Luke, please, let me try. They locked eyes across the cab. In that moment, Clara saw everything. His fear, his helplessness, his desperate need to protect everyone, and his knowledge that he couldn't. 5 minutes, he said finally. You get 5 minutes to find it. Then you run like hell for the creek. Don't try to make it to town. Go to the water and stay there until it's safe. Okay? I mean it, Clara. 5 minutes. She kissed Daisy's forehead. I'll find Bunny. I promise. Then she was out of the truck and running. The heat hit her like a wall. The wind was a living thing now, hot and violent, tearing at her clothes and hair. Clara ran back the way they'd come, eyes scanning the roadside for any flash of gray fur. Behind her, she heard Luke's truck drive away. She was alone. The smoke was visible now, a dark wall advancing across the prairie. Clara ran faster, lungs burning, sweat already soaking through her shirt. She'd never been athletic, had spent the last 20 years behind a desk, and now she was running for her life in 100-degree heat. There. A flash of gray in the ditch. Clara scrambled down the embankment, grabbed the stuffed rabbit, clutched it to her chest. Relief flooded through her, then she looked up and her blood went cold. The fire had jumped. Somehow, impossibly, it had moved faster than anyone predicted. What should have been 5 miles away was suddenly everywhere. Orange flames racing through the dry grass, leaping from bush to bush, devouring everything in its path. And it was between Clara and the creek. She couldn't go forward, couldn't go back. The road behind her was already burning, smoke so thick she could barely see. Think. She had to think. The barn. Luke's barn was a quarter-mile east, off the main road. Stone foundation, metal roof. It might withstand the fire. If she could reach it, if she could get inside and seal herself in, she might survive until it passed. Clara ran. She'd never run like this, with death literally at her heels. The heat was unbearable, the smoke choking. She couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, could only trust that she was going the right direction. Something exploded behind her, probably the truck's gas tank at the ranch. The sound was enormous, rattling her bones. Keep running. Don't stop. Don't think. The barn materialized out of the smoke like a ghost. Clara sobbed with relief and stumbled through the door, slamming it behind her. She stood in the relative darkness, gasping for air that was only slightly less toxic than outside. The horses were gone. Luke had turned them loose. But there was hay everywhere, dry and perfect kindling. This was a terrible idea. She was going to die in here. But going outside was certain death, so Clara did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed buckets, started filling them from the water trough, and began soaking everything she could reach: the walls, the floor, herself. She dumped water on the hay bales, on the wooden beams, on the tack hanging from hooks. The roar outside grew louder. Through the cracks in the walls, Clara could see orange light. The heat intensified until it felt like being inside an oven. She kept throwing water, kept moving, kept praying to anyone who might be listening. Then the roof caught fire. Clara looked up and saw flames licking along the metal, finding gaps in the seams. Sparks rained down. The hay bale nearest the wall burst into flame. She was out of water, out of options, out of time. Clara wrapped herself in a wet horse blanket, curled up in the corner farthest from the burning hay, clutched Bunny to her chest, and waited to die. She thought about Daisy's face, the kids in the truck, Luke's eyes when he'd let her go. She thought about her father, dead at 45, her mother, hollow with grief, David's betrayal, all the years she'd spent protecting herself from pain, and she thought about these past weeks, the best weeks she'd had in years, cooking in a warm kitchen, Sophie's trust, Natalie's friendship, even Ethan's grudging respect, the family she'd found when she'd stopped looking for one. Clara closed her eyes and let the tears come. The fire raged, the barn filled with smoke, and Clara surrendered to whatever came next. Then she heard it. Through the roar of flames and the crackle of burning wood, voices, shouting, "Clara! Clara, where are you?" Luke. Clara tried to scream but choked on smoke. She tried to stand but her legs wouldn't work. She managed to crawl forward toward the door, dragging the blanket with her. The barn door crashed open and Luke was there, a wet cloth over his face, eyes wild. "Oh, thank God." He scooped her up like she weighed nothing. "Hold your breath. We're going through fire." "Luke, you can't. The flames." "Hold your breath." Clara buried her face in his chest and did as she was told. Luke ran. Clara felt the heat even through the wet blanket, felt Luke's body tense as flames licked at them. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Then cool air. Blessed, beautiful cool air. She opened her eyes. They were at the creek, in the water, Luke holding her while the fire raged around them. Ethan was there too, also in the water, watching the barn collapse in a shower of sparks. "You stupid, stubborn, amazing woman," Luke was saying, half laughing, half crying. "What the hell were you thinking?" Clara held up the stuffed rabbit, miraculously still intact. "I promised Daisy." Luke stared at the rabbit, then at Clara. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle or romantic. It was desperate and fierce and tasted like smoke and ash and relief. Clara kissed him back, dizzy with adrenaline and lack of oxygen and the simple, overwhelming fact that they were both alive. When they finally broke apart, Luke pressed his forehead to hers. "Don't ever do that again." "Which part?" "Any of it." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "You could have died, but I didn't. Only because I came back for you." "Why did you come back?" Luke's expression was raw. Everything he usually kept hidden laid bare. "Because the thought of losing you was worse than the thought of running into fire." Clara's breath caught. Ethan cleared his throat. Guys? The fire's still burning. We should probably stay in the water." They stayed in Willow Creek for 3 hours while the fire burned itself out. The water was cold, fed by mountain snowmelt, and they huddled together against the bank. Luke in the middle, Clara and Ethan on either side. They watched the ranch burn. The house went first, flames consuming white clapboard, and 2 stories of memories in less than 30 minutes. Clara watched the porch collapse, taking the wind chimes with it, watched the roof cave in, watched every room she'd cleaned and cared for turn to ash. The outbuildings followed, the chicken coop, the machine shed, everything except the stone foundation of the barn, which stood like a tombstone in the wreckage. "I'm so sorry," Clara whispered. Luke's arm tightened around her. "You're alive. Nothing else matters. Your home was already dead before you came. Now it's just official." His voice was rough but steady. "We'll rebuild." "How?" "Same way we've done everything else. One day at a time." Ethan was quiet, staring at the ruins with an expression Clara couldn't read. Finally, he said, "Mom's things. All her pictures, her clothes, her—" His voice broke. "Everything's gone." Luke closed his eyes. "I know, son. I kept her favorite sweater in my closet. I take it out sometimes when I—" Ethan couldn't finish. Clara reached across Luke to grip Ethan's hand. The boy didn't pull away. They sat in the creek while the sun set, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of orange and red. Eventually, the fire moved on, chasing the wind east. Sirens wailed in the distance, fire trucks that would arrive too late to save anything. As darkness fell, Luke finally stood. "Come on, let's see what's left." What was left was almost nothing. The house was a shell, walls standing, but everything inside gone. The stairs had collapsed. The kitchen was rubble. Clara's room, the small guest room with the faded quilt, was open to the sky. Luke walked through the ruins with a flashlight, checking for hot spots. Clara and Ethan followed, silent witnesses to destruction. In what had been the living room, Luke stopped. He knelt and pulled something from the ashes, a picture frame. The glass shattered, but the photo inside protected. He wiped it clean and held it up to the flashlight. It was a family photo. Luke and Anne and 6 children, taken maybe 3 years ago. Anne was laughing, her arms around Natalie and Sophie. Luke looked younger, happier. The children were all smaller, all smiling. "I thought we'd lost all of them," Luke said quietly. "I put the albums in the attic when Anne died. Couldn't stand seeing them." And the attic fell into the living room, Clara realized. Apparently. Luke stared at the photo. "This is the only one I have left." "Maybe the only one you need," Clara offered. Luke looked at her. "Maybe." They found a few other things in the wreckage. Natalie's jewelry box, melted but with some contents intact. One of the twins' baseball gloves. Sophie's art portfolio, scorched but salvageable. And in what had been Daisy's room, surrounded by ash, a ceramic angel from the wind chimes, cracked but whole. Small mercies in an ocean of loss. Headlights appeared on the road, Luke's truck driven by Natalie. The girl parked and ran to her father, the other children tumbling out behind her. "Dad!" Natalie threw herself at Luke. "We saw the smoke, and they said the whole ranch was gone, and we thought—" "We're okay, sweetheart. We're all okay." Daisy found Clara and wrapped around her legs. "You got Bunny!" Clara handed her the stuffed rabbit, slightly singed but intact. "I promised." The little girl burst into tears. "You almost died for Bunny." "For you," Clara corrected gently. "I almost died for you." The children clustered around them, all talking at once, crying, laughing, processing trauma in real time. Luke held them all, this father who'd already lost so much and come so close to losing everything again. Finally, Sophie pulled back and looked at the ruins. "Where are we going to live?" It was the question they'd all been avoiding. Luke took a breath. "Don't know yet, baby, but we'll figure it out." "The Hendersons offered their guest house," Natalie said. And Mrs. Cooper said, "We're not taking charity from women who spent the last month calling Miss Hayes names," Ethan said flatly. "We might not have a choice," Luke said. "We always have a choice." Clara watched this 16-year-old boy stand up to his father with quiet conviction and felt pride swell in her chest. "The motel in Artemis has rooms," she offered. "Not ideal, but—" "Can't afford it long term," Luke said. "Insurance will cover rebuilding, but that takes time. Months, probably." They stood in a circle, illuminated by truck headlights, surrounded by ash and ruin, and tried to solve an impossible problem. Then Caroline said, "What about the bunkhouse?" Everyone turned to stare at her. "What bunkhouse?" Clara asked. "The old one, past the creek, near the north pasture. Grandpa built it for ranch hands back in the day." Caroline looked at her father. "Is it still standing?" Luke's eyes widened. "I haven't checked. It's stone construction, metal roof, like the barn foundation," Ethan finished. "It might have survived." They piled into the truck and drove north, following fence lines in the dark. The landscape was scorched, still smoldering in places. But as they crested a rise, headlights illuminated a small stone building, still standing. The bunkhouse was rough. One large room, a tiny bathroom, a potbelly stove, no running water. But the roof was intact, the walls solid, and the windows, though cracked, were still there. It's not much, Luke said. It's shelter, Clara countered. There's only one room for 8 people. We'll make it work. The children were already exploring, calling out discoveries. A table with 3 legs, a shelf full of ancient canned goods, a bunk bed frame missing its mattresses. We can't live here, Natalie said, but she was smiling despite the tears on her face. This place is tiny. We camped in smaller, Caleb reminded her. Remember when we went to Yellowstone? That was 3 days, not... Natalie stopped. However long this takes. Luke was calculating. Clara could see it, running numbers, making lists, planning, always planning. We'll need mattresses, he said finally, and a way to heat water, and we'll figure it out, Clara interrupted gently. One thing at a time, remember? He looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. You don't have to stay for this. What? This isn't what you signed up for. Cooking in a kitchen is one thing. Living in a one-room bunkhouse with 6 kids and a traumatized widower is something else entirely. The children went quiet, watching. Clara stepped closer to Luke, close enough that the kids probably couldn't hear. Do you want me to leave? No, but I can't ask you to stay for this. You're not asking. I'm choosing. Clara, I ran into a burning barn for a stuffed rabbit. You really think I'm going to leave now because the accommodations aren't ideal? Despite everything, Luke almost smiled. You're insane. Probably, but I'm staying. Even though it's going to be cramped and hard and... Even though... Clara held his gaze. We're family now, Luke, and family doesn't leave when things get hard. Behind them, Daisy whispered to Sophie, Does this mean Miss Hayes is staying forever? I think so, Sophie whispered back. Good, Daisy said firmly, because I love her. Claire's throat closed. She turned to find all 6 children watching her with expressions that ranged from hope to relief to simple acceptance. I love you too, she said, and meant it. All of you. Natalie started crying, then Caroline. Then all of them were crying and laughing and hugging, this family that had been broken and was somehow, impossibly, starting to heal. Luke pulled Clara aside while the kids explored their new temporary home. You know this changes everything. I know. The town's going to have a field day. Unmarried woman living with a widower and his children in a one-room building. Let them talk. It'll be hard on the kids. The kids just lost their home. I think they can handle gossip. Luke studied her face in the truck headlights, searching for doubt or hesitation. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He kissed her again, soft and slow and full of promise. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Thank you. For what? For running into fire. For coming back. For staying. He paused. For teaching me it's okay to live again. Clara's eyes filled. You taught me the same thing. They stood like that for a long moment, while the children's voices echoed from the bunkhouse, and the smell of smoke hung heavy in the air. Everything they'd built over the past month was ash. But somehow, standing in the ruins, Clara felt more hopeful than she had in years. They'd survived the fire. Now they just had to survive what came after. The first night in the bunkhouse, nobody slept. They had no mattresses, no blankets, nothing but the clothes on their backs and each other. Luke drove back to town at midnight and returned with sleeping bags borrowed from the fire department, pillows from the motel, and enough bottled water to last a few days. Clara organized the space as best she could, creating sleeping areas with the limited resources they had. The children huddled together on one side of the room, a tangle of limbs and borrowed sleeping bags. Luke insisted Clara take the only bunk frame, even though it had no mattress. She refused until he pointed out that someone needed to be coherent enough to handle things in the morning, and he wasn't going to sleep anyway. He was right. Clara woke several times during the night to find him sitting by the window, staring out at the charred landscape, his face illuminated by moonlight and the distant glow of smoldering embers. The second time she woke, she got up and sat beside him. You should rest, she said quietly. Can't. His voice was hollow. Every time I close my eyes, I see you running back toward the fire. I see the barn collapsing. I see... He stopped, jaw working. But I'm here. We're all here. This time.
Luke turned to look at her, and the fear in his eyes was raw. What about next time? What happens when there's another disaster and I can't save everyone? Clara recognized this spiral. She'd lived it herself after her father died. The constant anxiety that everyone she loved was one heartbeat away from disappearing. You can't control everything, Luke. I should have seen the fire coming sooner. Should have evacuated earlier. Should have what? Predicted lightning? Controlled the wind? Clara took his hand. You did everything right. We're alive because of the choices you made. You almost died because I let you go back. I almost died because I chose to go back.
That's on me, not you. Luke's fingers tightened around hers. I can't lose anyone else, Clara. I can't survive it again. Then don't lose me. I'm right here. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. They sat like that until dawn broke over the ruined ranch, two broken people holding each other together. Morning brought new challenges. The children woke disoriented and scared, the reality of their situation hitting fresh in daylight. Daisy cried for her room. Sophie wanted her art supplies. The twins argued about who got which corner of the bunkhouse. Natalie tried to hold everyone together and ended up snapping at Caleb, who snapped back, and soon everyone was on edge. Clara had no kitchen, no ingredients, no way to cook the comfort food that had become her primary language of care, but she had bottled water and protein bars from the fire department, and she distributed them while Luke went to assess the damage in full daylight. He returned an hour later, covered in soot and looking defeated. Insurance adjuster's coming tomorrow. Fire marshal wants to do an investigation. And the town... He stopped, pulled Clara aside. The town wants to help. That's good, isn't it? Mrs. Henderson is organizing a donation drive. Mrs. Cooper is rallying the church. Everyone who spent the last month judging you is now falling over themselves to bring casseroles and sympathy. Clara heard the bitterness in his voice. So we accept their help and move on. Just like that? What's the alternative? Hold a grudge while your children sleep on the floor? Luke scrubbed his face. I hate that they're doing this because the fire made us sympathetic, like we weren't worth helping before. Maybe they needed the fire to shake them out of their own fear, Clara said quietly. People are complicated, Luke. They can be cruel and kind, often at the same time. You're defending them? I'm saying we need help, and they're offering it, and maybe that's enough for now. He looked at her for a long moment. How are you so calm about this? Because I spent too many years being angry at people who hurt me, and it only hurt me more. Clara squeezed his hand. Let them help. We'll sort out the complicated feelings later. The town descended on the ranch by noon. Trucks arrived loaded with donated furniture, clothes, food, bedding. Mrs. Henderson brought a full-size mattress that barely fit in the bunkhouse. Mrs. Cooper arrived with 3 casseroles and tears in her eyes. Men from the church helped Luke start clearing debris. Women clustered around Clara, offering condolences and asking what was needed. It was overwhelming and awkward and exactly what they needed. Mrs. Henderson pulled Clara aside while the others unloaded supplies. I owe you an apology. Clara waited. What I said in the feed store about you and Luke and propriety, it was cruel and unfair. The older woman's face was tight with shame. I was so focused on what people would think that I didn't consider what those children needed. And when I heard you'd run into the fire for Daisy's toy, her voice broke. I realized you care more about this family than all of us combined. I don't need you to feel guilty, Mrs. Henderson. I just need you to stop making things harder. I will. We all will. She pressed a container into Clara's hands. Fresh cookies. I know they're not much, but they're perfect. Thank you. Mrs. Henderson nodded and moved away, and Clara stood holding cookies and trying to process this strange reversal. Yesterday, she'd been the town scandal. Today, she was the hero who'd risked her life for a child. The truth, as always, was more complicated than either narrative. By evening, the bunkhouse was transformed. Not comfortable. It was still one room for 8 people, but livable. They had mattresses, blankets, a camp stove for cooking, a water tank connected to the well. Someone had brought a small refrigerator that ran on propane. Someone else had donated a bookshelf and filled it with books. The children explored their new reality with a mix of excitement and grief. Caleb claimed a corner for his baseball equipment. Caroline set up a reading nook. Sophie arranged her salvaged art portfolio carefully on the shelf. Natalie organized clothes in the donated dresser. Ethan helped his father install better locks on the door. And Daisy placed her singed stuffed rabbit on the windowsill where she could see it from her sleeping bag. Clara made dinner on the camp stove, her first meal in what felt like forever. Just spaghetti with jarred sauce, nothing special, but the children ate like it was a feast. "This is weird, right?" Caleb said through a mouthful of pasta. "Yesterday we had a house. Today we're basically camping." "Indoor camping," Caroline corrected. "Still camping." "Is it bad that I kind of like it?" Sophie asked quietly. "I mean, I miss our house, but I don't know. This feels cozy." Natalie snorted. "Cozy is one word for 8 people in a room the size of our old garage." "But we're all together," Daisy pointed out. "In the house, everyone had their own room. Now we're all here." Luke set down his fork. "You kids okay with this? Really?" "Not like we have a choice," Ethan said, but not unkindly. "You do, though. We could take the Hendersons up on their guest house, or find temporary rentals in town. Split up until we rebuild." "No." The word came from all 6 children simultaneously. "We stay together," Natalie said firmly, "whatever that looks like." The others murmured agreement. Even Ethan nodded. Luke's eyes were suspiciously bright. "All right then, together it is." After dinner, Clara volunteered to do dishes at the outdoor pump. It was cold and awkward, washing plates with icy well water, but it gave her a moment alone to process everything. She didn't hear Natalie approach until the girl was right beside her. "Need help?" "Sure." They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes. Then Natalie said, "You kissed my dad." Clara nearly dropped the plate she was washing. "What?" "At the creek. During the fire. Ethan saw you." Clara's face burned. "Natalie, It's okay." The girl's voice was gentle. "I'm not mad. None of us are." "You talked about it?" "Of course we talked about it. We've been waiting for you two to figure it out for weeks." Clara didn't know what to say to that. "Is it serious?" Natalie asked. "Or was it just an adrenaline thing?" Clara considered lying, making it simple. But these children deserved honesty. "I don't know what it is yet. Everything's complicated right now." "Because of Mom?" "Because of a lot of things. Your mom, my divorce, the fact that we're all living in one room. Do you love him?" The question hit Clara like a physical blow. Did she love Luke? When had the respect and attraction turned into something deeper? Was it the moment he'd defended her to the town? The night they'd stood on the porch and he'd called her part of his family? The second she'd seen him running through fire to save her? "I care about him very much," Clara said carefully. "That's not what I asked." Clara met Natalie's eyes. "Yes, I think I do." The girl smiled. "Good. He loves you too. He's just scared to admit it." "How do you know?" "Because he looks at you the way he used to look at Mom. Like you're the most important thing in the room." Natalie handed Clara a wet plate. "And because he's been dead for 2 years and you brought him back to life." Clara's throat closed. "I didn't." "You did. We all see it." Natalie paused. "Do you think he'll marry you?" "Natalie, I'm serious." "Because if he does, we need to talk about expectations." Clara laughed despite herself. "Expectations?" "Yeah, like you can't try to replace Mom, and you have to let us have bad days where we're sad about everything we lost, and you can't play favorites with us kids." "I would never." "I know, but I needed to say it anyway." Natalie dried her hands. "Also, if you hurt him, we'll make your life miserable." "Noted." "But if you love him and take care of him and don't leave," Natalie's voice softened, "then I think we could be okay with you being our family. Like, officially." Clara pulled the girl into a hug. Natalie stiffened for a moment, then relaxed, and they stood like that in the dark with wet hands and full hearts. "Thank you," Clara whispered. "For what?" "For giving me permission to love your father." "You didn't need permission, but you're welcome anyway." The next week passed in a blur of insurance adjusters, fire marshals, and donations. The official investigation determined the fire was natural. Lightning strike, dry conditions, bad luck. No one was at fault. The insurance would cover rebuilding, but the process would take months. Meanwhile, life in the bunkhouse found its rhythm. Luke and Ethan worked dawn to dusk, salvaging what they could and planning reconstruction. The younger children adjusted to their new normal, playing outside and doing homework by lantern light. Natalie became Clara's assistant, helping with cooking and organizing. And Clara learned to make a home out of almost nothing. She cooked meals on a camp stove and made them taste like comfort. She hung curtains to create privacy zones. She instituted bedtime stories, reading aloud to all the children crowded around her. She turned washing dishes at the pump into a game. She made the impossible work because the alternative was giving up. Luke watched her with something like wonder. "You're incredible," he said one night after the children were asleep. They were sitting outside on borrowed camp chairs, the only privacy they could find. "I'm just doing what needs doing." "No, you're making this tiny space feel like home. That's magic." Clara laughed softly. "It's not magic. It's just showing up." Anne used to say that 90% of love is just showing up consistently. It was the first time Luke had voluntarily compared Clara to his wife, and the moment felt significant. "She was right," Clara said quietly. Luke was silent for a long moment. "I need to tell you something." Clara's stomach tightened. "Okay." "The night of the fire, when I thought you were dead," his voice cracked, "I realized I couldn't do this without you. Not the ranch, not the kids, not life. You've become essential, Clara, and that terrifies me." "Why?" "Because I can't lose you, and I don't know how to love someone without being terrified of losing them." Clara reached for his hand. "You don't stop being terrified. You just decide the love is worth the fear." "Is it?" "Worth it." "I think so. But I'm scared too, Luke. I'm scared I'm not enough for 6 children. I'm scared the town will make this impossible. I'm scared you'll wake up one day and realize you don't actually want me. You just want someone to fill the empty spaces." "You think that's what this is?" "I don't know. How could I know? We've only known each other a few months, and half that time was crisis and chaos." Luke stood, pulled her up to face him. "You want to know how I know this is real? Because when I was married to Anne, I thought I knew what love was. But it was easy love. We grew up together, wanted the same things, fit like puzzle pieces. There was never a question. And with me? With you, it's hard. You challenge me, push back when I'm wrong, make me think about things differently. You're not trying to fit into Anne's space. You're carving out your own. And that scares me because it means I'm not just repeating something familiar. I'm building something new." Clara's breath caught. "Is that what you want? Something new?" "I want you, however that looks." He cupped her face. "I'm not asking you to marry me tonight. We've got a bunkhouse full of kids and a ranch to rebuild and 1,000 complications. But I'm asking, will you stay? Really stay? Not as the hired cook, but as family?" Clara thought about all the reasons she should say no. The complications, the timing, the grief they were all still carrying. But she thought about Daisy's trust and Sophie's nightmares and Natalie's permission and Ethan's grudging respect. She thought about this man who'd run into fire for her. And she thought about the woman she'd been when she arrived, hollow, hiding, convinced she was better off alone. "Yes," she said. "I'll stay." Luke kissed her, soft and slow and full of promise. When they broke apart, he was smiling, actually smiling, maybe the first real smile she'd seen since they met. "The town's going to lose their minds," he said. "Let them. The kids are going to have questions. We'll answer them. This isn't going to be easy. Nothing worth having ever is." They sat back down, hands linked, and watched the stars wheel overhead. In the bunkhouse, someone coughed, probably Caleb. A coyote called in the distance. The wind whispered through scorched grass. "Clara? Thank you for running into that barn." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you for running in after me." The following Sunday, Luke made an announcement that sent shockwaves through Artemis. He stood up during church service, the first time he'd attended since Anne's funeral, and addressed the congregation with Clara sitting beside him and all 6 children in the pew. "Most of you know about the fire. You've been generous with donations and support, and my family is grateful." He paused, choosing his words carefully. But I need to address something that's been the subject of gossip. Clara Hayes is living with us in the bunkhouse. Not because I'm inappropriate or she's improper, but because she's family. She risked her life for my daughter. She's been there for my children in ways I couldn't be. And with the house gone, we're all staying together because that's what families do. The church was dead silent. I know what some of you think, that it's too soon, that Anne wouldn't approve, that we should maintain appearances. Luke's voice hardened. But Anne would have loved Clara. She would have been grateful that someone was caring for our children with such dedication. And she would have told anyone judging us to mind their own business. A few people laughed. More looked uncomfortable. So I'm asking, if you can't support us, at least don't make it harder. These kids have been through enough. They don't need to hear whispers about their home life on top of everything else. He sat down. Clara's hand found his under the cover of her skirt. After the service, the reactions were mixed. Some people apologized. Others kept their distance. But Mrs. Henderson approached with tears in her eyes. Luke's right. Anne would have loved you. She squeezed Clara's hand. Thank you for taking care of them. It wasn't universal acceptance, but it was a start. That afternoon, while the children played outside and Luke worked on rebuilding plans, Clara found herself alone in the bunkhouse for the first time in days. She stood in the center of the small room and took stock. This wasn't the life she'd planned. She'd come to Wyoming to hide, to heal, to avoid connection. Instead, she'd found 6 children who needed her, a man who'd somehow become essential, and a purpose that felt right in ways her old paralegal job never had. She thought about her mother, who'd remarried and was happy now in Arizona. About David, who'd sent a perfunctory message after the fire asking if she was okay, but clearly not caring about the answer. About the woman she'd been in Denver, careful, controlled, alone. That woman seemed like a stranger now. A shadow fell across the doorway. Clara turned to find Ethan standing there, hands in his pockets. Can I talk to you? Of course. He came inside, nervous in a way she'd never seen him. I've been thinking about what Dad said in church, about you being family. Clara waited, uncertain where this was going. I've been pretty terrible to you, Ethan continued, especially at the beginning, and I'm sorry for that. Ethan, you don't... Let me finish. He took a breath. I was protecting Mom's memory, or I thought I was. But really I was just scared that if we let someone new in, we'd forget her. That loving you would mean not loving her anymore. And now I think... He struggled for words. I think Mom would have wanted us to love you, because you love us. And that's what she cared about most, that we were loved. Clara's eyes stung. Thank you for saying that. There's something else. Ethan pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box. This was Mom's engagement ring. Dad kept it, said he'd give it to me someday for when I got married, but I think... He held it out to Clara. I think he should give it to you. Clara's breath caught. Ethan, I can't. I'm not saying he should propose tomorrow, but when he does, whenever that is, I want you to have this. We all do. We talked about it. You talked about it. Yeah. Me and Nat and the twins, Sophie and Daisy, are too young to really get it, but they're on board too. He pressed the box into her hands. You're already our family, Miss Hayes. This would just make it official. Clara opened the box with shaking hands. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond, nothing fancy, but beautiful in its simplicity. It's perfect, she whispered. So you'll take it? I'll keep it safe, for when the time is right. Ethan smiled, really smiled, and for a moment he looked like the boy he should have been instead of the man he'd been forced to become. Good. That's good. He left, and Clara sat on the mattress holding Anne Mercer's engagement ring and crying. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of being trusted with something so precious. She heard footsteps and looked up to find Luke in the doorway. Ethan gave you the ring, he said. It wasn't a question. You knew? He asked permission first. I told him it should be your choice. Luke sat beside her. Are you okay? Clara laughed through tears. I'm terrified. Your children are planning our future. The town is watching our every move. We're living in a room the size of a closet, and I'm holding your dead wife's engagement ring. So no, I'm not okay. But I'm also happier than I've been in years, so I don't know what that says about me. Luke pulled her close. It says you're brave enough to choose complicated joy over safe misery. That's all any of us can do. They sat like that while the afternoon light faded and the children's voices echoed outside. Eventually, Clara put the ring away in the small drawer where she kept her few possessions. Someday, maybe, Luke would give it to her officially. But for now, knowing it was waiting felt like enough. That night, as everyone settled into their sleeping arrangements, Daisy asked the question they'd all been dancing around. "Miss Hayes, are you going to be our new mom?" The room went silent. 6 children and 1 father, all watching Clara with varying degrees of hope and anxiety. Clara chose her words carefully. "I can't be your mom, Daisy. You already had a wonderful mother, and nobody can replace her. But I can be someone who loves you and takes care of you and shows up every day. Would that be okay? What would we call you?" "Whatever feels right. Miss Hayes is fine. Or Clara. Or nothing special, just the person who makes dinner and helps with homework." "Can I call you Mama Clara?" Daisy asked. "Like how Grandma is Grandma Rose?" Clara's throat closed. She looked at Luke, who nodded slightly. "If that feels right to you, then yes. Then that's what I'll call you." Daisy snuggled into her sleeping bag, satisfied. "Good night, Mama Clara." "Good night, sweetheart." One by one, the other children followed suit, testing the name, making it theirs. Even Ethan, who still mostly called her Miss Hayes, looked like he might try it eventually. Clara lay in the dark long after everyone else was asleep, listening to the breathing of this family that had somehow become hers. She thought about the woman who'd stepped off a bus 3 months ago with nothing but a suitcase and a skillet. That woman had been looking for a job. She'd found a home instead. And in the morning, she'd wake up and make breakfast on a camp stove and help children get ready for school and work alongside Luke to rebuild what the fire had taken. Because that's what family did. They showed up. They stayed. They chose each other, over and over, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The first snow came in late October, 6 weeks after the fire. Clara woke to find the world transformed, white powder coating the charred landscape like forgiveness. The burned remains of the house were softened by snow, made beautiful in the way that only distance and cover could manage. She stood at the bunkhouse window, coffee warming her hands, and watched Luke and Ethan already at work in the early morning light, their breath making clouds in the cold air. They'd been rebuilding for weeks now. Not the house. That would wait until spring when the ground thawed and materials were easier to transport. But they'd rebuilt the barn, erected a proper chicken coop, and started on a new equipment shed. Small victories that added up to something like hope. Behind her, the children still slept in their respective corners of the bunkhouse. They'd gotten used to the close quarters, had even started to appreciate them. Daisy liked being able to reach out in the night and touch someone. Sophie said the breathing of her siblings helped her sleep. The twins had stopped fighting about space and started building elaborate blanket forts that turned half the bunkhouse into an adventure. Only Natalie sometimes looked at the cramped room with longing for privacy. But even she admitted there was something comforting about never being alone. Clara finished her coffee and started breakfast, moving quietly around the camp stove. Oatmeal this morning, with brown sugar and the apples someone from church had donated. Simple food, but made with care. She'd learned that care mattered more than complexity, that showing up every morning with something warm was worth more than the fanciest meals served with resentment. "Smells good." Clara turned to find Natalie awake, wrapped in a blanket, hair tangled from sleep. "Couldn't sleep?" "Had a weird dream." Natalie came to stand beside Clara, watching the oatmeal bubble. "About Mom." Clara's hand stilled on the spoon. "Good weird or bad weird?" "Good, I think. She was in our old kitchen, baking cookies, and she saw you through the window and smiled." Natalie paused. "Then she waved you in, like she wanted you to join her." "How did that make you feel?" "At first scared, like she was trying to replace herself or something. But then I realized she wasn't replacing herself. She was welcoming you." Natalie's voice was thick. "She was saying it was okay." Clara pulled the girl into a hug. Natalie had grown taller in the past few months, was almost as tall as Clara now. Soon she'd be taller. "Your mom loved you all so much," Clara said quietly. "I think if she could speak to you now, she'd tell you that loving me doesn't mean forgetting her."
I know. It just helps to dream it sometimes, to feel like she approves. They stood like that until the oatmeal started to burn, and Clara had to rescue it while Natalie laughed and wiped her eyes.
By the time the other children woke, the moment had passed, but the warmth of it remained. After breakfast, Luke came in from the barn covered in snow and grinning in a way that made him look 10 years younger. "Come outside, all of you." The children bundled into donated coats and boots and tumbled into the yard where Luke had been working. There, taking shape against the white landscape, was the frame of a new structure. "Is that the house?" Caroline asked. "Not the house. Not yet." Luke's eyes found Clara's. "It's a kitchen, real kitchen, separate from the bunkhouse. Thought we could use a place to cook proper meals before winter really sets in." Clara's breath caught. A kitchen. Not just a camp stove in the corner, but a real space with walls and a roof and room to work. "When did you start this?" she asked. "Been planning it for weeks. Ethan and I have been working early mornings before you wake up." Luke walked her over to the frame, showed her where everything would go. "Here's the stove, here's the counter space. That'll be a window looking out toward the mountains. And here," he pointed to a corner, "that's for your cast iron skillet. Figured it needed a proper home." Clara's eyes filled. The skillet had survived the fire, pulled from the ashes, scorched but intact. It sat in the bunkhouse now, but she'd been reluctant to use it with just the camp stove. "Luke, this is... I don't know what to say." "Say you'll christen it with the first meal when it's done. Say you'll make it yours." "When will it be finished?" 2 weeks if the weather holds. Maybe 3. He pulled her close, not caring that the children were watching. "I know the bunkhouse is tight. I know you've been cooking in impossible conditions. This is me saying thank you, and saying I want you to have space that's yours. You're building me a kitchen." "I'm building us a kitchen. For our family." The word hung in the cold air. Our family. Not his family that she was helping with. Not the kids plus the cook. Our family. Together. Clara kissed him, right there in the snow with 6 children whistling and making gagging noises. When she pulled back, she was laughing and crying at the same time. 2 weeks, she said. "I'll make the best meal you've ever had." Better than Anne's Sunday chicken? The question would have been impossible a few months ago. Now Clara understood what he was really asking. Was she willing to make new memories instead of just preserving old ones? "Different than Anne's chicken," she said carefully. "Not better, just ours." Luke smiled. "That's perfect." The kitchen came together faster than expected. Luke and Ethan worked with single-minded focus, and men from town volunteered their time, hauling materials and hammering walls. Even Mrs. Henderson showed up with her husband, both of them working in companionable silence alongside the family they'd once judged. Clara watched the structure take shape and felt something shifting inside her. This wasn't just a kitchen. It was a statement, Luke claiming her as permanent, building her a space in his life that was tangible and real. 10 days after the first frame went up, the kitchen had walls, a roof, and a door. 15 days after that, it had a working stove, running water, and counters. Luke had even managed to install the window he'd promised, wide and tall, framing the mountains in the distance. On a cold November afternoon, Clara walked into her kitchen for the first time. It smelled like fresh paint and sawdust. The floor was concrete, simple and practical. The cabinets were unfinished pine that would need sealing, but there was a stove, a real stove with 4 burners and an oven. There was a sink with hot and cold water. There was counter space, shelf space, room to move and breathe and create. Clara ran her hands over the counter and cried. "You hate it." Luke's voice came from the doorway, uncertain. "I love it. I absolutely love it." He came to stand beside her. "It's not fancy, not like what you're probably used to. It's perfect. It's exactly perfect." She turned to face him. "You built this for me." "Built it for us, but yeah, mostly for you." Luke cupped her face. "You've given us so much, Clara. Let me give you this." She kissed him, slow and sweet, in the kitchen that was somehow both new and already home. That night, Clara cooked her first meal in the new kitchen. Nothing elaborate, just pot roast with vegetables. The kind of simple comfort food she'd learned this family loved best. But she used Anne's cast iron skillet for the first time since the fire, and she didn't feel like she was trespassing. She felt like she was honoring a legacy while building her own. The children crowded around the kitchen table, a donated piece that seated 8 if everyone squeezed, and ate with enthusiasm that went beyond hunger. "This is so much better than camp stove food," Caleb announced. "Hey, my camp stove food was good," Clara protested. "It was fine," Caroline corrected diplomatically. "But this is really good." Sophie, always the quiet observer, said what they were all thinking. "It feels like we're home again, like things are getting back to normal." "Not normal," Natalie corrected gently. "Different, but good different." Luke raised his glass of water. "To new beginnings. And to Clara, for making this house feel like home even when we didn't have a house." They clinked glasses and drank, and Clara felt the weight of belonging settle into her bones. After dinner, while the children did homework at the table and Luke checked on the livestock, Ethan helped Clara wash dishes at the new sink. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. "Always." "Are you going to marry my dad?" Clara's hand stilled in the soapy water. "He hasn't asked." "But if he did, would you say yes?" She looked at this boy who'd challenged her, tested her, and finally accepted her. "Yes, I would," Ethan nodded slowly. "Good, because I think he's going to ask soon. He's been weird lately, nervous. Dad's never nervous. Maybe he's just stressed about rebuilding. Maybe. Or maybe he's trying to figure out how to propose to a woman while living in a one-room bunkhouse with 6 kids. Ethan grinned. "Not exactly romantic." Clara laughed. "Romance is overrated anyway. Mom used to say that. Said Dad proposed to her at a cattle auction because he was too impatient to wait for a better moment." "That sounds about right." "She said yes anyway. Said the moment didn't matter as much as the person asking." Ethan dried a plate carefully. "I think she'd like you, Clara. I think she'd be grateful Dad found someone who loves us as much as you do." Clara's throat closed. "Thank you, Ethan. That means everything." He nodded and went back to drying, but the moment lingered between them. Acceptance given, family claimed. The proposal came on a Sunday morning in December. Clara woke early to find Luke already awake, sitting on the edge of their shared mattress with a nervous energy that was completely unlike him. "Can't sleep?" she whispered. "Need to talk to you." "Outside?" They dressed quietly and slipped out of the bunkhouse without waking the children. The sun was just rising, painting the snow-covered ranch in shades of pink and gold. Their breath made clouds in the cold air. Luke led her to the kitchen, which he'd already warmed with the stove. Coffee was brewing. He must have come out here even earlier than she'd realized. "You're making me nervous," Claire said. "What's going on?" "I've been trying to figure out how to do this for weeks. Kept planning these elaborate moments, but nothing felt right." Luke poured 2 cups of coffee, handed her one. "Then I realized I was overthinking it. So I'm just going to say it." Clara's heart hammered. "When you showed up here 5 months ago, I was dead inside, going through motions, raising kids on autopilot, just trying to survive each day. I'd convinced myself that was enough, that I didn't deserve more than survival after losing Anne." "Luke, let me finish." He set down his coffee, took her hands. "You brought me back to life, Clara. You brought all of us back to life. You showed up every single day and loved my children when they were grieving and difficult. You fought for us when the town judged us. You ran into a burning building for a stuffed rabbit." His voice cracked. "You chose us, over and over, when leaving would have been easier. Because I love you, all of you. I know, and I love you too. Not the same way I loved Anne. That was a different life, a different love, but just as deep, just as real." Luke reached into his pocket, pulled out the small velvet box that Ethan had given Clara months ago. "My son gave you this. My children already think of you as family. The only person who hasn't made it official is me." He opened the box. The simple gold band caught the morning light. "Clara Hayes, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and the mother to these 6 incredible kids and my partner in rebuilding this ranch and this life?" Clara looked at the ring, at Luke's face, at the kitchen he'd built for her and the life they'd created from ashes and grief and stubborn hope. "Yes," she said. "Yes. Absolutely yes." Luke slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. Then he kissed her, soft and reverent, in the kitchen that was theirs, in the life that was theirs on the ranch that was slowly becoming whole again. "The kids are going to lose their minds," Clara said when they finally broke apart. "They already know. I asked their permission last week." "You asked their permission?" "Of course I did. This affects them as much as us." Luke smiled. Ethan gave his blessing immediately. Natalie cried and said it was about time. The twins high-fived each other, Sophie hugged me and said she was happy, and Daisy asked if this meant she could be flower girl at the wedding. Clara laughed through tears. "What did you tell her?" "That she could be anything she wanted to be. That this wedding was for all of us, not just you and me." They walked back to the bunkhouse hand in hand, and Clara felt lighter than she had in years. She'd come to Wyoming broken and hiding. She was leaving behind that version of herself and stepping into something new. Wife, mother, partner. Not because she'd been looking for those roles, but because life had given them to her anyway. The children were awake when they returned, clustered around the camp stove and clearly waiting. The moment Clara and Luke walked through the door, 6 pairs of eyes locked on Clara's left hand. "She said yes!" Daisy shrieked, and chaos erupted. The children swarmed them, hugging and chattering and asking 1,000 questions at once. When would the wedding be? Where would they have it? Could they all be in the wedding party? What would Clara's dress look like? "Slow down," Luke said, laughing. "We just got engaged 5 minutes ago. We haven't planned anything yet." "Can we have the wedding here?" Sophie asked. "On the ranch?" Clara and Luke exchanged glances. "Where exactly? We don't have a house yet." "In the new kitchen," Natalie suggested. "It's the newest building, the most hopeful one, the one that means we're staying and rebuilding and choosing to be happy." Clara's eyes filled. "That's perfect, yes. Let's get married in the kitchen." They planned the wedding for Christmas Eve. It seemed fitting, a celebration of family on a day meant for togetherness. They'd keep it small, just family and a few close friends. The pastor from Artemis agreed to perform the ceremony. Mrs. Henderson volunteered to make a cake. The children threw themselves into preparations with enthusiasm that bordered on obsession. The weeks before Christmas passed in a blur of planning and building and healing. The house began to take shape, foundation poured, walls framed, a roof over part of it. It wouldn't be done for months yet, but the skeleton of it was there, a promise of what was coming. Clara divided her time between cooking in her kitchen, helping with wedding preparations, and supporting the children through their own complicated feelings. Because as excited as they were about the wedding, it also brought up grief about their mother, about the family they'd lost, about change and permanence, and all the messy emotions that came with moving forward. Sophie had another nightmare the week before the wedding. Clara found her in the kitchen at 2 in the morning, curled up on the floor in front of the stove. "Sweetheart, what are you doing out here?" "Couldn't sleep. Came here because it's warm." Clara sat beside her. "Want to talk about it?" "I had the fire dream again, but this time Mom was in it. She was in the house and I couldn't save her." "Oh, honey. Is it bad that I'm happy about the wedding, but also sad that Mom isn't here for it?" "No, it's not bad at all. You can feel both things at the same time." Sophie leaned against Clara. "I wish she could meet you. I think you two would have been friends." "I wish I could have met her too." "Do you think she knows about you and Dad?" Clara thought about Natalie's dream, about the sense of blessing and permission that seemed to weave through their life. "I think if there's any way for her to know, she does. And I think she's glad you're all being taken care of." "Will you put flowers at her grave at the wedding?" Clara's throat closed. "If you want me to. I want you to, so she knows she's still part of our family even though you're joining it." The morning of Christmas Eve dawned clear and cold. The ranch was beautiful under fresh snow. The charred scars of the fire softened and covered. The kitchen had been transformed. Pine boughs and white lights strung along the rafters, chairs borrowed from the church arranged in rows, a simple altar created from a table covered in white cloth. Clara dressed in the bunkhouse with Natalie's help. She'd bought a simple cream dress from a shop in town. Nothing fancy, just something that made her feel beautiful. Natalie helped with her hair, pinning it up and leaving a few tendrils loose. "You look perfect," the girl said, eyes shining. "Thank you for helping me get ready. Thank you for marrying my dad, for choosing all of us." They hugged, and Clara felt the past and future colliding in this moment. Grief and hope, loss and love, everything that had brought them here. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. Luke stood at the altar in a suit that was slightly too big, borrowed from someone in town. The children were arranged beside them, Ethan and Natalie on Luke's side, the younger four on Clara's. They'd all wanted to be part of it, to stand as witnesses to this family being officially formed. The pastor spoke about love that endures, about families built from choice as much as blood, about new beginnings rising from ashes. Clara barely heard the words. She was too focused on Luke's face, on the children's smiles, on the simple gold band that would join the engagement ring on her finger. When it came time for vows, they'd written their own. Luke spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. "Clara, you came into our lives when we were broken and grieving, and you didn't try to fix us. You just loved us exactly as we were. You showed up every day through fire and loss and cramped living quarters and town gossip. You chose us when leaving would have been easier. Today, I'm choosing you back. I promise to love you, honor you, and build a life with you that honors both our past and our future." Clara's turn. She looked at Luke, at the children, at the kitchen they stood in. "Luke, when I came to Wyoming, I was running from pain and hiding from connection. You and your children taught me that real love isn't safe or easy. It's choosing to show up even when you're scared. It's running into burning buildings for stuffed rabbits and building kitchens in the snow and making space in your heart for people who need you. I promise to love you and these children with everything I have, to honor the family you built with Anne while helping build the family we're creating together, to stay through whatever comes, because you're my home now." There wasn't a dry eye in the kitchen. The pastor pronounced them married. Luke kissed her while the children cheered and the small gathering applauded. And Clara felt something settle inside her, a sense of belonging she'd been searching for her entire life. The reception was held right there in the kitchen, with food that Clara and the children had prepared together. There was no dancing, no room for it, but there was laughter and stories and toasts. Mrs. Henderson cried through her entire speech about second chances. Ethan stood up and welcomed Clara officially into the family, his voice steady and sure. And Daisy, the youngest, pulled Clara aside during dessert. "Do I still call you Mama Clara, or just Mama now?" Clara knelt to the little girl's level. "Whatever feels right to you, sweetheart." Daisy considered this seriously. "I think just Mama, because that's what you are now, really and truly." "Really and truly," Clara agreed and held her daughter close. As the celebration wound down and guests departed, Clara found herself standing in the kitchen doorway with Luke, watching the children clean up and chatter and exist in the easy way that came from security. "We did it," Luke said quietly. "Did what?" "Built a family out of nothing, rebuilt after the fire took everything." Clara leaned against him. "Not nothing. We had each other." "True." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Think we'll make it, long term?" "I think we'll have hard days. I think there will be moments when grief comes back and knocks us sideways. I think the kids will struggle and the ranch will have challenges and we'll fight about stupid things." "That's not very encouraging." "But I also think we've already survived the worst of it. We've already proven we can face fire and loss and come out the other side." Clara turned to look at him. "So yeah, I think we'll make it. Because we choose to every single day." Luke kissed her properly then, his wife now, his partner in all the complicated, beautiful, messy work of living. Inside the kitchen, Daisy called out, "Mama, can we have hot chocolate?" Clara smiled against Luke's lips. "That's me. I'm Mama now." "You've been Mama for months. This just makes it official." She went inside to make hot chocolate while Luke helped the children finish cleaning. And as she stood at her stove in her kitchen on her ranch with her family around her, Clara thought about the woman who'd stepped off a bus 5 months ago. That woman had been looking for a job, for a place to hide, for a way to survive her own brokenness. She'd found so much more. She'd found 6 children who needed her, and a man who'd learned to love again. She'd found a purpose in showing up, in cooking meals and comforting nightmares and running into fire when necessary. She'd found that love wasn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It was about choosing to stay, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The house would be finished by spring. They'd move out of the bunkhouse and into proper rooms again. Life would develop new rhythms, new challenges, new joys. The children would grow up, would carry both grief and happiness into their futures. The ranch would thrive under Luke's careful management and Clara's steady presence. But the real healing had already happened. It happened in a bunkhouse crowded with 8 people choosing to be family. It happened in a kitchen built from love and determination. It happened in small moments and grand gestures, in daily choices to show up and stay in love even when it hurt. Clara poured hot chocolate into mismatched mugs and carried them to the table where her family waited. Luke's hand found hers. The children's voices rose in happy chaos. Snow fell softly outside the window. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara felt completely, perfectly home. She'd come to cook. She'd become everything instead. And that, she thought as she looked around at the faces of the people she loved, was exactly how it was supposed to be.